entirely inspire.
Lecture over here, and today we're going to learn about we're going to be talking about the human capital investment. And human capital investment is very important. I guess whatever you're doing right now, all of you, your student, your undergraduate student, or perhaps some of you may be the postgraduate students, and I guess that whatever you're doing right now actually is the investment in the human capital. You're actually investing in the human capital because you're studying right now. Now, education is a form of the investment. So it is a form of investment that we do at the school. And after we've graduated from the school or the university, so there will be another form of the investment, and that's called the investment in the training, Now, besides investing in the education and investing in the training, of course, the human capital can be in the form of health, kesehatan, in the form of the health. Now, just imagine if you invest in the supplements, if you invest in the vitamins, the food intake, a nutritional food intake, that is actually improving the productivity. And when the productivity has been improved, so the wage or the earnings can be improved as well. So health is also a form of the human capital investment. Now, when we talk about changing our job, hopping from job to job, all right, that's called the job mobility. It is also another form of the human capital investment, because through the job hopping, so it is expected that the productivity can be increased, and in turn, we can climb up to the job ladder to get a better position and a better income. So that is also another form of human capital investment. So there are a lot more for whatever form of the human capital investment it is, for as long as it is a form of investment that can improve the labor productivity, that in turn increase the wage or improve the earnings, and that is called a human capital investment. And today we are going to talk about the human capital investment in the form of the education as well as the training. Now, before we go further, so let's take a look at the theory of the human capital to start with. Now, the idea of the human capital investment actually, it has been around, it has been generated more than 200 years ago, thanks to Adam Smith. He was considered to be the father of economics, the father of the modern economics. So with his writings on the wealth of the nations. In fact, he had already mentioned about the importance of human capital investment in this writing. Now, take a look at this classical works. Okay, let me get my pen first. Now, take a look at this classical word. Now, when any expensive machine is erected, the extraordinary work to be performed by it before it is worn out, it must be expected will replace the capital laid out by it with at least ordinary profits. Now, what is the meaning of this first sentence? It means that now if a company buys a machine, if it puts a machine into the production, okay, of course, the company has to invest in this machine. So an amount of money had to be put aside in order to bring this machine into the production process. Okay, the work that is performed by this machine, in terms of increasing the productivity before it is depreciated, before the machine wears out. Okay, now it must be expected that it is greater than the capital laid out by it. The capital means the investment amount that we have put in order to buy that machine. Now, just imagine the benefit or the advantage, the monetary benefit that we can actually get from that machine must be greater than the amount of the investment that we have put in getting this machine, in putting this machine into production. So that is the idea of investment. Of course, we have to be able to earn from the profit. We have to be able to earn from the output that is produced by the machine. So in order to make our investment well spent, okay? Now, at least at ordinary profits means that at least there's a break even when the money that is invested in buying the machine must be equal to the benefit that is generated by it. Of course, if we are able to generate a super profit or maybe super normal profit, that would be a good idea. So that's why any form of the investment, especially in the machine, so it is expected that we'll be able to, to earn the extraordinary or the super normal profit. Okay, now that is in terms of the investment in the capital or in the physical capital. Now, when we talk about the investment in the human capital, a man educated at the expense of much labor and time to any of those employments which require the extraordinary dexterity and the skill must be compared to one of those expensive machines. Now, what is the meaning of that? A man that is educated at the expense of much labor and time. That means if you spend your time, or if you give up your job or your salary in order to go back to the university to attend a university qualification, attend a university degree, so you're considered to be investing in the human capital. You're investing in the education because you're willing to give up your existing job. You're willing to give up your time in order to study, in order to get a university qualification. Now, once you have graduated from the university, you're just comparable to those machines because you're equally productive, just like the machine. Okay, now just imagine if the machine could be the capital, it could be the physical capital to your company, so is the man, because the man is investing in the education, and that knowledge that he has possessed can become a capital to him. It can become an asset to him because the knowledge that he has obtained can improve the productivity. And in turn, when the productivity is improved, the earnings as well as the salaries can be improved. And this person and this worker will be able to get promoted to the next level. Okay, so in this case, we say that the man who is educated, who has got this knowledge, is considered to be the capital. And that's why we call them as the human capital, because it is comparable to those machines, which can be productive. All right, but look at that. Look at the second part of the sentence. The work which he learns to perform, the work that he learns to perform, the knowledge he gained from the university, or the training he has obtained from the workplace, it must be expected over and above the usual wages of the common labor. So that means it must be greater than the wage. It must be greater than the wage that is paid to any ordinary worker who has not gone into the education, who has not received the education. So that makes the difference between a university graduate and those without the university qualification, because it is expected that the productivity that is produced by those who are highly educated is expected to be greater compared to those who have a lesser amount of the education. So that's the reason why you're here in the university, because it's with the hope that you'll be able to, to obtain the higher level of the education, and it can be applied at the job, at the job market, so that the productivity can be increased and the salaries can be increased as well. Of course, there must be a motivation for you. Why do you want to invest in the education? Because it is with the hope that you'll be able to get a higher salary compared to those who have a lesser or a lower level of the education. You just imagine if you stop at the high school and you are not investing in the university right now. So how much could have earned? How much could you have earned as a high school graduate? Okay, and once you have graduated from the university, how much you could have earned as a university graduate? So that's the difference, and that's the wage differences. And these wage differences actually are, the benefit of the human capital, which is supposed to be greater than the cost that you have invested in it in getting this educational qualification, which is your school fees, yuran pengajian, your school fees. All right. So now, the productivity, okay, whatever you have learned, performed, okay, so it must be greater than the wage of the common labor. All right, your salary, your remuneration must be expected to be greater than the salary and the remuneration received by someone without the same level of the education as yours. And therefore, the return that you will be getting, it must be replacing the whole expense of the educational expenses. So that means that the remuneration, the returns that you have obtained must be able to cover to cover, look at the classical language here, look at the classical language here, replace to him the whole expense of the education. That means the returns that you'll be getting, it must be able to cover the expenses that you have made, the invested fund that you have made in investing in the education. Otherwise, there will be no motivation for you. There's no inducement for you to invest in the education. At least the ordinary profit of an equally valuable asset. So that means the returns that you'll be getting from investing in the education must be at least equal to the return that you will be getting if you had invested the money elsewhere. So for example, if you don't want to study in the university, so where else can you spend your money to? You may be spending your money to investing in the stock market, or you may be putting your money into the fixed deposit in order to earn for the interest rate, all right, the interest rate. Or you may be investing in the stock market to get the profit out of the stock investment. But what about the returns from that investment? Okay, so in this case, the returns from the human capital investment is expected to be at least the same as the returns from other forms of the financial investment, in order for you to be motivated to invest in the human capital. So in this case, of course, we must be able to compare the differences in the returns of the investment in the education and the returns of the investment from other forms of the financial assets. So if the returns from the human capital is greater than the returns from other forms of the financial assets, so definitely you have the motivation to keep going to invest in the human capital. All right, so that's the idea behind that. Now, look at that. More than 200 years ago, now this beautiful mind had been, put forth by the great economist Adam Smith. That was more than 200 years ago. So this is actually the idea of the human capital investment. But later years, this idea, this very important idea of investing in the human capital had been neglected by the economists because they mostly focused on investing in the physical asset. For example, the machines, the land, the building, the infrastructure, all these are the physical assets. Now, many of the researchers, many of the economists had ignored or neglected the importance of the investment in the human capital, but only in the 50s, thanks to Jacob Mintzes and Gary Becker, they actually put forth the theory of the human capital. The theory of the human capital that precursors the subsequent research work on the importance of the human capital. All right. So in this case, the idea of the human capital investment had been conceptualized and had been put forth by Gary Becker, Jacob Mintzes, and the form of the human capital can be in terms of the education investment, the training, the migration, the healthcare, and the job search. Now, these are the common forms of the human capital investment. So the first one is what you're doing right now. What I'm doing right now, what you're doing right now. So this is the education. And when you've graduated from the university later, maybe 2 to 3 years later, so you'll be investing in the training as well. You'll be investing in the training. Now, investing in the training, who will be taking charge of investing in the training? So not you, and it will be employer. Because as the employer will have to send the workers for the training. Okay, so the training session has to be arranged in order to improve the productivity of the workers, and in turn, the workers can improve the salaries as well as the productivity and also the profitability of the company. So in this case, now, when we talk about investment, not many companies or not many people will be interested to invest in the education. Now just imagine for those who are staying in the rural area, so maybe due to the financial constraints, so it will be less likely for them to invest in the education, because investing in the education is a long process. Now just imagine how many years you spent in the university, and that was just a bachelor's degree. Now, if you want to go for the master's qualification or even the PhD qualifications, how many years you have to spend in the university? And of course, this investment, the name suggests investment, as the name suggests investment, it's actually subject to the uncertainty. Uncertainty, so nobody will ever be sure that in the future you'll be getting the salary that you have expected for, and you'll be getting the job that you have desired for. So what if COVID struck again? What if COVID strikes again? Okay, what if there'll be economic downturn in the future? So whatever you have invested right now, so it turns out that it is not, well, it may be of lower value. And at the same time, maybe the knowledge you have learned today may be obsolete in the future. The knowledge you have learned in the university may not be relevant in the future. Okay, so if that's the case, you cannot make a great fortune out of it. So that is the problem of the investment, because it is subject to the uncertainty, just like any form of the financial investment. Any form of the financial investment, it is subject to the uncertainty. So that's just because of that, people who are present-oriented, they may not be likely to invest for their future. Whereas for those who are future-oriented, they look towards the future. They look towards the future. So, well, so this person will be more likely to tolerate or compromise the current consumption in order to give way to the better futures. So that is called investment. So of course, what we have learned here is that the human capital investment is actually subject to the uncertainty. So that's why we have to be really sure that what kind of the cost that is incurred when investing in the education, whether it is a direct cost like the school fees, or the indirect cost, like the opportunity cost in terms of the salaries that you have to give up, you have to forego. If you want to invest in the education, you may have to forego your part-time job. Now, you might have earned a salary from your part-time job. Now that you have to let go of the salary just to give way to investing in the education. And that's called the opportunity cost. Now, after we have considered the direct cost, the transportation cost, the tuition fees, the rental, the hostel rent, all right? So the indirect cost, like the opportunity cost, okay? And you have to factor all these costs into the calculation. All right. And you have to consider what will be the anticipated benefit that you'll be getting after you have graduated from the university. That will be in terms of the improvement in the salaries. All right. So if the changes or the increase in the benefit, which is in the form of the monetary return, the salary increase, all right? If it is greater or equal to, at least equal to the cost, the initial cost of the investment in the human capital, so it's profitable. So you will go for the investment, and that we call an additional year of the education is good, because the extra benefit, the additional benefit that you're going to get is greater than it can actually cover the expenses that you have put, all right, into investing in the education. Okay, and the rate of returns to the education that you're going to enjoy must be greater or at least equal to the rate of returns from alternative investment, like I mentioned to you just now. So only by achieving these criteria, can someone be interested in investing in the education. And of course, now, what we are going to get in the future, is throughout our life cycle. Whatever we are investing right now is for the benefit of the future. It will take us through our work life until the day of the retirement. So that's why when we are talking about the benefit, of the human capital, so we are referring to the benefit of the entire working life, which is the life cycle, the entire working life. So therefore, the salary will be evolved. The earnings will be evolved. All right. So you'll be getting lower salary at the start of the career, and at the prime age, your salary will be peak. And then when you're nearing the retirement age, your salary will be, improving slowly. Okay, the increase will be at a decreasing rate. So now when we're talking about the investment, we are actually interested to maximize the present value of the lifetime earnings. We're not referring to the earnings of 1 or 2 years, but we're referring to the earnings throughout our lifetime. Therefore, when we talk about maximizing our earnings throughout our lifetime, when what lifetime is something that is far into the future, and the monetary value far into the future may have a different value compared to the current value. So that's why here comes the idea of present value. So we have to discount the future value back to the present value in order for us to do the comparison between the present value of the future money with the current cost of investment. Okay, so that is the idea of comparison. So that's why the money in the future has to be discounted at the average interest rate. Now, usually the R here is the interest rate. So the present value is the future value divided by 1 plus R to the power of the T. So the T is the number of the period. The R here actually is the discount rate. It is a discount rate. It is the average of the interest rate. Okay, now, different person may have to assign different level of the R when he discounts the future value back to the present value. Now, if you are present oriented means that someone who is only concerned about the current consumption. Now, he doesn't want to invest in the future because future is something unpredictable to him, and he can't wait, to get his salary right now. And partly because that this person may come from a poor family, all right? So he's in need of money right now. Now, if he were to sacrifice his family and to enter into the university, so now who's going to take care of the family? So that's why in this case, he needs the consumption very much right now. He needs the present consumption, the current consumption very much. And therefore, just because of this person is not willing to wait or spend a few years in the university in order to invest in the university qualification for the future, because he can't wait. He is present oriented. Now, this kind of person will be less likely to invest in the education because he has a financial constraint and a financial problem. The family needs him. Okay, the family needs him. He needs the current consumption to be fulfilled. So that's why this kind of person will usually look at the R to be very high. The discount rate will seem to be very high for this person. Now, if you imagine, if you substitute a very high R, the discount rate, into this formula, it seems like the present value seems to be lower. When the present value of the future earnings seem to be lower, you don't even have any motivation for you to invest in the education, because it seems like the earnings, the future benefit that you're going to get is kind of low for you to convince yourself to invest in the education. But hang on, for those who are future oriented means that he doesn't care about the current consumption. What he is interested in is the future, the benefit of, the betterment of the future. So that's why in this case, this person will be more likely to invest in the education, to sacrifice his current consumption, to save up the money in order to pay for the school fees, with the hope that he will be getting the returns after he has graduated from the university. So throughout his lifetime, he will be earning the salary. He's willing to wait to delay his consumption in order to give way to investing in the education, with the hope of getting a greater returns in turns. Now, this kind of person will be, he will be looking far into the future. He will be planning ahead, okay, with the hope of getting higher salary, better remuneration in the future. He has a foresight, looking far into the future. Now, this kind of person is called the future-oriented person. And as the future-oriented person, he will see the discount rate to be low, all right? When the discount rate is low, it seems like the present value for any future earnings seemed to be greater. So in this case, the person who is future-oriented will be more likely to enjoy a greater present value of the future benefit. And in turn, this person will be more likely to invest in the education because to him, it seems like the investment in the human capital seems to be generating greater returns to him compared to someone who is present-oriented. Someone who is present-oriented will view this present value of the future earnings to be lower, okay? So let's see if there's any, all right. All right, so that is the idea of present value calculation because we want to, because the value of the money in the future is different from the value of the money now, just because of the inflation. So that's why we have to discount the future money back to the present in order for us to compare with the present value of the cost. So that if the present value of the benefit is greater than the cost of investment, so we'll be more likely to invest in this human capital. Or now, if you want to decide whether you want to go for the education A or the education B, all right? The level of the education A and the level of the education B. So of course you have to compare what will be the present value if you invest in A and if you invest in B. As long as the present value of investing in A is greater than that of the B, so you will settle at the investment in the A. All right, so that's the idea behind that. Now, just because of that, now here comes the schooling model. Like I mentioned just now, the higher the discount rate, the less likely someone will invest in the education because the present value seemed to be low. Okay, so I have already mentioned this in my previous slide just now. All right, now, when we talk about the schooling model, it is a comparison of the potential earning streams faced by someone with only the high school qualification compared to someone who goes to the college. Now, just imagine if you go to the college, if you go to the university, so how much salary you'll be earning, after you've graduated from the university, but not to forget, because you have to incur the cost. Now, just imagine if you, at the age of 18, if you quit your high school, now you're going to work at the age of 18 until the age of 65, which is the retirement age. So assuming that there will be no increment in your salary, there will be no increase in the salary. So your salary is constant, is fixed throughout your lifetime to keep our analysis simple. So just imagine if you start your work at 18 years of age and you retire at the age of 65 years old. Now your salary is W. So we can actually draw a graph like this. So this is the potential earnings throughout your lifetime. If you have quit the high school, you do not invest in the university. Okay. Now just imagine if you want to spend another 4 years, in the university, and you graduate from the university at the age of 22, and that's the time that you enter into the job market and to earn a salary of W. So we expect that the knowledge is not depreciated. And with the knowledge you have learned from the university, you'll be able to get the higher salary just like this. Now you can see that this is the difference. The salary that you earned as a university graduate is greater than the salary you could have earned as a high school leaver. Okay, so that's the benefit. That's the future benefit that you're going to earn. Now, compared to the cost, what is the cost? Look at this. The cost here refers to the school fees. For the first 4 years, you have to pay for the school fees. So that's the cost. That's the explicit cost that you can see. But there's also an implicit cost. Remember, if you were to study, you have to give up on your job. Now just imagine if you don't study, you could have earned an income for up to 4 years. Now, just because you invest in the university, you have to let go of your current job. And that means you have to let go or to sacrifice on your salary. So the salary that you need to sacrifice in order for you to invest in the university, now it becomes the opportunity cost for you. Now that's the implicit cost or the indirect cost I mentioned to you just now. Now the indirect cost and the direct cost must be combined in order to be compared with the benefit. All right, the benefit. Okay. Now this is the age earnings profile. You can see here, it is the age. It is the earnings plot against the age. The greater the age, the higher the age. When someone gets older, the salary will be increased, but the increase will be at a decreasing rate. Okay, so this is the age earnings profile. Now, from this age earnings profile, we can see the potential earnings stream if you have obtained the university qualification compared to just a high school, and the cost that is incurred. Now, as long as this area where you have discounted back to the present value, if this area, this amount is greater than the cost, then go for the college education. It's worth investing in the education. That's the idea of investing in the education, which is why when you put it into equation, so the present value of the age earnings profile here, so the present value of obtaining just a high school, so this is the present value of the future earnings. Now just imagine at the age of 18, to the age of 65 years old, all right? Sorry, to the age of 64, before you hit 65, that you retire. So there will be 47 terms, first terms, second terms, third terms, and this is the 47th term. But in terms of the year, we put it at the time, all right, time factor, we put it as a 46, okay? But in fact, it's already 47th term, including the initial year, all right? Now, the initial year, the benefit that you're going to get for the initial year is the salary. It is a salary that you get as a high school leaver, all right? It will not be discounted because it's a present value already. Now, 1 year later, the earnings that you have obtained, it is subject to the discount, all right? And 2 years later, the earnings that you get, it's also subject to the discount as well, so on and so forth. Now, there will be 47 terms over here. Now, if you press a calculator, so you're going to sum up this present value of the future earnings. And when you sum it up, it will be the present value, the total of the present value for having completed the high school, Now, this is going to be the potential earnings stream throughout the lifetime, Okay, throughout the lifetime, if you have just obtained a high school, all right? If you don't mind, can you just mute your mic? Can you check your mic? Okay, thank you very much. Now, another situation is if you want to invest in the education, if you want to invest in the university, of course, it incurs cost of investment for the first 4 years. Now, you're going to retire at the age of 65 as well. So it is the same amount of the terms, but the first 4 terms have been devoted to the education, investing in the education. So that's why you have to spend 4 years in the school, in the university, and each year incurs the cost. And the first year, the cost will not be discounted to the present value because it's the current cost. And a year later, all right, in the second year, so you have to discount the cost back to the present. Okay, 1 year later, you have to discount the cost back to the present. And 2 years later, you have to discount the cost of education back to the present. And 3 years later, all right, so altogether 4 years, 4 terms. So that will be the total amount of the present value of the cost of education, that you have already discounted back to the present. And now you're only left with how many terms? You're only left with another 43 terms. So altogether 47 terms, but the first 4 terms have been devoted to investing in the education that incurs the cost. The remaining 43 terms will be exactly the time that you spend in the labor market throughout your lifetime once you're graduated from your college and you're making higher salary. Look at that. The salary is higher. It's no longer WHS. Now your salary reflects the salary that should be obtained by those graduated from the university. And once again, it has to be discounted back to the present. All right. Now look at that. So if you calculate it correctly, you're going to have the total present value of the future earnings made by those graduated from the college. All right. And also the total value of the present value of the future earnings made by those graduated from the high school. Now look at that, which one is higher? Now, if you think that the present value of the college is greater than the present value of the higher school or the high school, so of course, in this case, you're going to invest in the college because it's worth it. The present value of investing, the present value of the future earnings from the investment in the college education is going to be greater than the present value of the future earnings from the high school leaver. So in this case, it's worth it. It's worth the investment in the college education. So in order for you to maximize the present value of the lifetime earnings, so the present value of the college education must be greater than the present value of the high school in order for you to decide whether you want to invest in the college education or not. Now, once you have graduated from the university and once you enter into the job market, you're going to earn a salary. You're going to earn a salary. All right. Now, the question is, how many years of the education should be invested in order to maximize the present value of the earnings stream? So what is the stopping rule? The stopping rule shows the optimal level of the schooling that you have to obtain, the optimal level of the schooling that you have to obtain. Okay, now, how many years of schooling you have to obtain? Different person may have a different optimal year of schooling. Different person may have a different level of the schooling that he or she considers to be the optimal level. Now, just imagine if you have the potential to study. If you have the potential, you have the ability to study, and definitely you'll be investing in the education. You may be likely to invest in the postgraduate, to the master, or even to the PhD, because you have the ability to study. And at the same time, you come from a well-affluent family. Your family can afford your study at the university. Or maybe you have the scholarship from the government, or you have the financial assistance from the government, or maybe the bank. So in this case, you have the urge to invest in the education. All right. So compared to someone who doesn't have these facilities, all right, it doesn't have the privilege. So this person may be likely to drop out from the school, or this person may be likely to invest relatively less level of the education compared to you. So in this case, the optimal level of the education may vary by person. It may vary by person. Now, whether it is higher level or the lower level, so of course we need to have a stopping rule. And a different person may have a different stopping rule depending on how they view, depending on the cost of education and the benefit that he or she will be getting. And also how he views the future, how he views whether he is the present-oriented person or a future-oriented person. Okay, so that's why we have to compare the rate of returns to the education with the returns elsewhere, in order for us to justify what is the level of the education that we should stop at. Okay, now if we want to calculate the rate of returns to the education, we have to learn about the wage schooling locus. The wage schooling locus actually links between the wage and the schooling. The higher the level of the schooling, the higher the salary. So that shows an upward sloping relationship. That shows a positive relationship between the year of the schooling and the wage. Now the slope itself, the slope, keturunan. Okay, the slope itself tells us about the increase in the earnings that is associated with the additional year of the schooling. So that means the percent of the increase, the percentage change in the salary or the wage from a 1 year increase in the education. So what is the extra salary in terms of percentage you could have earned if you spent 1 more year in the education? And that's called the rate of returns to the education. It must be at least equal to the rate of returns from the investment elsewhere in order for you to make a decision in the human capital investment. It is concave. This wage schooling locus is supposed to be concave because that reflects the diminishing returns to the schooling. What does it mean by the diminishing returns to the schooling? As you go along to your study, as you invest more and more years of study to get a master or even a PhD, all right? Of course, the benefit from investing in the education will keep on increasing. The salary will be increased. If you have a PhD compared to those who have just got a master's and compared to those who have just got a bachelor's degree, definitely the salary will be different. All right, those with a higher level of the education definitely will be getting higher salary. But the increase in the salary that is obtained by those who have a higher level of the education is expected to be increased as a smaller rate compared to those who have a lower level of the education. The percentage change. Why? And that's called diminishing returns to schooling. Because the cost of education that you have invested into higher level of the education is expected to be greater. You need to spend more money to get a master or even a PhD. And you have a relatively less time horizon for you to offer yourself to the job market, to recoup the investment. All right. So that's why with a relatively short time period for you to offer yourself to the job market and a relatively high cost of investment in the education, it turns out that the salary can be increased, but the increase in the salary is relatively low compared to the increase in the salary in the previous level of the education where the cost of education is relatively low. All right, so that's why the wage schooling locus looks this way. So this is how it looks. Now, this is called concave because the increase as you go along with the year of the education, the salary will be increased, but the increase is at a decreasing rate. Look at that. From 12 years of education to 13 years of education, the salary, the annual income had been increased from 20,000 to 23,000. But look at that, it's a 15% increase. But when it comes to, from 13 years to 14 years of the education, extra 1 more year of education, you can imagine that the salary is increased by just 8.7%. So that is what I meant by the diminishing marginal returns. So if we want to look for the slope, when we calculate the slope of this wage schooling locus, the slope actually tells us about the percentage change in the wage with respect to the change of 1 year, with respect to the increase in the 1 year of the education. And that's called the marginal rate of returns to the schooling. And the marginal rate of returns to the schooling is exactly the slope of the wage schooling locus. And when we plot the marginal rate of returns to schooling, so the year of schooling is the horizontal axis and the rate of discount or the rate of returns to the education is on the vertical axis. So it seems like it is downward sloping because the wage schooling locus is concave. So therefore the slope is supposed to be declining. So now the slope is the marginal rate of returns. So therefore, the marginal rate of returns actually is a declining trend, which is captured by the MRR here. Now, the MRR here is the marginal rate of returns, okay? Now, we have to compare this marginal rate of returns to the R. The R is the discount rate. It is a discount rate, all right? It is a discount rate of how you view yourself, whether you are the future-oriented person or the present-oriented person. Okay, so that depends on the R. And the R actually is the average of the interest rate, the average of the market interest rate. Okay, Now, in this case, look at that. At this level, S prime, the S prime is not the optimal level of the education yet. Because look at that. If you keep on investing in the education, it will be more likely for you to enjoy greater marginal rate of returns compared to the interest or the rate of returns elsewhere. Now, just imagine if this is the rate of returns from any other investment. For example, the unit trust, for example, well,
Gak tahu sih, kayaknya beda nih ya, MRR ini.
Sorry, is there any question? You have forgotten to mute your mic.
Ya, nggak lagi tempat coknya, Me.
Miss Patrick, sorry, you have forgotten to mute your mic. Okay, thank you. Now, look at that. The R here is the rate of returns. It is a rate of returns from other investment. So if you imagine now, if you want to put your money into the bank and you're going to invest in the bank, you're going to enjoy the interest rate. Now the R is as if the interest rate, okay? Or it could be the returns from the investment in the stock market or in any other financial asset. Now look at that. If you invest in the education, the marginal rate of returns to the schooling is greater than any other rate of returns from any other alternative investment. So of course, logically thinking, rationally thinking, if you want to get more out of the investment in education, definitely you have to invest more in the education in order to capture more of the returns of the schooling. So at this point, look at that. Since the R is also the discount rate, since the R is still low. Remember our formula? When R is still low, that means the present value of the investment in the education is expected to be greater. Why do you have to stop at this level? Go ahead. Now, keep on investing in the education to this point where the MRR is exactly the same as the R. Now, look at the point, the level of the education beyond Y prime prime. Look at this level. Now, the marginal rate of returns to the education or the marginal rate of returns from the schooling is lower. It is lower than the rate of returns elsewhere. Now, under this situation, it is less profitable for you to invest in the education. You might as well just spend your money to invest your money elsewhere to make it out of to make a greater fortune, make greater return out of the investment from the financial asset. Other financial assets. So why do you have to invest in the education since the MRR is less? Now look at that. The R is also reflecting of the rate of discount. When the R is greater, you can expect the present value of the future earning is expected to be lower. So under that situation, it will be less likely for someone to invest in the education. So therefore, under this situation, this level of the education that is beyond the S star, the S prime prime here, it is not yet optimal. So therefore, what is considered to be optimal is just this level of the education where the MRR is the same as the R. Okay, now the MRR here can be viewed as the demand for the human capital investment. Because in order for you to demand for the human capital investment, it depends on the rate of returns. When the rate of returns to the education is high, definitely you'll have the urge to demand for it. You have the urge to ask for it. Okay. Now also, even when you have the urge to demand for the human capital investment, that also depends on your ability to get the money. The financial ability, whether your family can afford your study, whether you're able to get the scholarship, whether you're able to get the financial assistance or the loan from the bank, that depends on the R as well, because the R here reflects the market rate. The R reflects the market rate of interest. It could be the interest rate. It can also reflect the borrowing rate. So in this case, the R, so we assume it to be the R, which to be the borrowing rate. Now in this case, now, that borrowing rate can determine the supply of the human capital investment. Your ability to invest in the education depends on your financial affordability. If you're able to afford your study, and if it's easy for you to get access to the financial assistance, all right, a scholarship or financial assistance, okay? Now, or if the cost of education is low, all right? So therefore, in this case, it's relatively easier for you to get access to the financial assistance. So it will be more likely for the human capital investment to be supplied. So therefore, the supply of the human capital depends on the financial resources availability. Okay. Now, the demand for the human capital investment depends on your ability to obtain that level of the education, but that depends on the future earnings as well. So that's why the marginal rate of returns also reflects the demand for the human capital investment, and the R over here also reflects the supply of the human capital investment in terms of the availability of the human in terms of the availability of the financial resources. Now, when we put the demand and the supply together, the demand for human capital investment and the supply of the human capital investment, so in this case, there's equilibrium. The equilibrium here shows the optimal level of the schooling. So how many years of the education that you have to invest in order for you to maximize your lifetime earnings. Now, of course, there are a few factors that will shift the demand curve for the human capital investment, which is the MRR, your ability, your willingness, and also the existing system for the human resource development. Now, if a country has got a very well-developed human resources system, for example, the training system, the educational system is well organized, it's well developed in a country. Okay, so now that will actually improve the demand for human capital. People will be more likely to enter into the school, to enroll into the school because of the readiness or the availability of the education. All right, the availability of the education or the training. Okay, so in this case, the existing system for the human resource development that is available in a country will actually shift the demand curve to the right, Okay, now even though everybody has the same orientation, whether it's a future oriented or the present oriented, and everybody actually gets the same the financial availability will be the same for everybody. The financial affordability will be the same for everybody. Everybody will be getting the financial assistance from the government. So the R will be the same for everyone. Now, just because you have the ability, you have the greater ability and a greater willingness to invest in the education, then you alone will be more likely to invest more in the education. And that will be optimal for you. Now, you will never know. People enjoy studying. Many people enjoy studying. They may want to invest in the master or even in a PhD qualification, and they are willing to invest in the education because they have the ability to invest in the education, and that's why this person, they will be more likely to invest more in the education. But sometimes some people may not be willing to invest in the education, partly because that they have less ability to invest. This person is just not cut into studying. It's not suitable for studying. Maybe he thinks that it's okay for him to just obtain a bachelor's degree, but not going for the master or even a PhD. So under this situation, the ability or the willingness to study will be lower. And as a result of that, this person, even though he is facing with the same financial assistance or the financial assistance from the government, still this person will be investing in relatively less or low level of the education compared to those who have the interest and the ability and the willingness to invest in their education. This person will be more likely to invest in greater amount of education, and that makes a difference between the level of the education. And coming to the supply curve for the human capital investment. So what shifts the supply curve of human capital? Your willingness to borrow, the wealth, whether you come from a well-affluent family, your parents can afford your study, or the capital availability in the market. So whether there is a financial resources available in the banking system, or whether there is a scholarship available, or financial assistance available from the government. So all this will improve your willingness to invest in the education. Borrow the wealth and the availability of the financial resources in order for you to encourage you to ask for the education, and that's called support of the human capital, and it must be matched with the background, the family background. Yes, the family background is important. It is important in order to ensure the financial availability for you to invest, all right, for you to invest in the education. So therefore, this article tells us the importance of these two factors in order for us to determine the amount of the schooling that is optimal, okay? All right. So the idea about the ability that affects the demand for the human capital investment and the family background that affects the supply of the human capital investment. So that is given by this article. Okay. Now, next, what is the implication of the human capital theory? Now we have learned about the human capital theory. Of course, we have to bring the theory into practice. Now, there are a few implications. First of all, we talk about the cost. When the cost, now when we look at that, look at the formula 1 plus R. Okay, or even look at the formula, look at this one. Look at the present value of the earnings stream. Okay, now this is the cost of investment in the education. Now, in what way should we do in order to bring up this present value of the college education? That will be either the returns or the salaries of the college education is high enough, or the cost of the education is low enough. And that way, the present value of the future, it can be increased. Now, based on the theory of the human capital, it comes to us that in terms of the implication, so as long as there is a policy for us to bring down the cost of the investment and to bring up the salary or the returns or the earnings for those who have graduated from the university, that will be a good idea. So everyone will be interested to invest in their education. So therefore, the implications from the human capital theory is that as long as we are able to reduce the cost of investment, especially the direct cost of investment, or even the opportunity cost of investment, okay? So that could increase the enrollment. So therefore, if the university or maybe the government offers the scholarship to the student, that could partially reduce the cost of the education, and it will be more likely for people to invest in the education. Well, if let's say there is a system that allows the evening class, so that means the class will be conducted in the evening, but not during the daytime where everybody is working. So you don't even have to give up on your job. So that is to reduce the opportunity cost. Okay, if you don't give up on your job, you don't have to give up on your salary. Okay, you can attend the evening class. Still, you can invest in the human capital at the same time. You don't even have to give up on your job. So that is to reduce the opportunity cost. Now, having said that, if there is a policy that can actually reduce the cost of education, whether it's a direct cost or whether it is direct or the indirect cost, that could actually improve the present value of the future earnings, and that will be more likely for people to increase the enrollment. And that is the implication from the human capital theory. The age. Now, look at that. If you invest in the education, look at that. Look at the stream. Now, if you invest more years in the education, that means this stream of the cost, this cost stream is going to be greater or longer. Then you'll even have a shorter period of time, a shorter period of time for you, shorter horizon for you, to spend in the job market. So under that situation, yes, Willie, you have any question, Willie? Willie, you have any question? Can you hear me?
Terpencet, Pak.
Willie, do you have any question? Willie Sitinjak. No? Can I proceed? Okay, because you raised up your hand just now. So you raised up your hand just now. So I have to stop here for a while. It's all right. Okay, let me just continue with the lecture. If you have a question, you can ask me. You can stop me anytime. Okay, you can stop me anytime. So you can turn on your speaker. You can turn on your mic and ask me on the spot. Yeah, because I may not notice the reaction, the raised hand, the hand raising reaction. All right. So please stop me by speaking. Okay. Okay. Now look at that. Now in this case, you can see here. Now you can see here. Now if you spend more time in the university, then you'll have less time in the job market. So therefore, the age does matter. The age does matter. So that's why, just because when you're at the older age, it will be less likely for people to invest in the human capital because you have a lesser or the shorter horizon, shorter period of time for you to recoup your investment. Now just imagine if you're at the age of 50 or maybe nearing the retirement age, do you think you plan to invest in the PhD? Because PhD, it takes maybe easily 3 to 4 years to graduate from the PhD, to get a PhD. But then after 3 to 4 years later, you're going to retire. So how can you recoup the investment? So therefore, for people who are nearing the retirement age, it will be less likely for this person to invest in the education or training. Okay, because there will be a shorter horizon, shorter period of time for them to recoup the benefit. Okay, to recoup the investment fund. Sorry. Okay, so that's why this idea, the human capital theory, tells us that just because of the shorter period of time that you can rent out your human capital to the job market in order to replace with the salary. All right. Now, just because of that, people will tend to invest at the young age. The younger you are, the better. Because, for example, if you invest in the PhD, if you continue your study at the PhD, once you've graduated from the bachelor and you proceed to the master and even the PhD, all right? So now in this case, at the very young age, you have already graduated. At the age of 25, for example, you have already graduated from the PhD. And you have another 35 years, at least 35 years in the job market and to recoup the investment they have made. Okay, so isn't that a good idea? So that's why at a young age, it will be more likely for the young adults to invest in the education compared to the older persons, because the older person will have a fewer remaining work life to recoup the cost of the investment. And at the same time, the opportunity cost is going to be higher for the older person, because we expect that the older person must have already achieved a higher salary. Now, how could you give up on your higher salary? How could you give up on the salary just to give way to the education? So the salary is high and the opportunity cost is also high as well. So therefore, it will be less likely for people at the older age to invest in the education. And it will be more likely for people at the younger age, just like you, just like every one of you right now, to invest in the education, because it's worth the investment. You can recoup the investment in the future since you have a longer time to be spent at the job market. And that's the implication of the human capital theory. And that comes to us that how are we going to reduce the cost of investment? So I have now I refer to some of the past studies, some of the recent past studies, some of the recent studies on the importance of the tuition fee policy reform. Now, if a country reformed the tuition fee, that means to provide the tuition fee exemption, or even to provide or to offer the educational subsidies. Now, these are the important tools for the policymakers if you want to encourage your nation, if you want to encourage your people to invest in the education. So therefore, the tuition fee exemption or even the educational subsidies will do, because all these will reduce the cost. Look at that. The implication of the human capital theory says that when the cost of education is reduced, the enrollment will be increased. Now look at the reality. This is reality. This really happens. This really happens in Vietnam. In Vietnam, when the Vietnamese government exempt the tuition fee and to offer the educational subsidies, so it can actually improve the enrollment rate for the primary and the secondary level in Vietnam. Well, the high school enrollment rate is relatively unaffected. It's unaffected, okay, unaffected. Okay, because that's the compulsory education in Vietnam for the primary and the education and the secondary education. So therefore, in this case, once the government has exempted the tuition fee and also provided or offered the educational subsidies, the cost of investment in education is expected to be low. And as a result of that, it will be more likely for people to invest in the education. So it will be more likely for people to invest, for Vietnamese to invest in the primary and the secondary education. And it's also for the minority group to enroll in the education in the secondary or even in the high school. Minority group in Vietnam who have been marginalized, in this case, all this while it had been discriminated, and thanks to the government, now the government offers the educational subsidies and also to exempt the tuition fee. So all these will reduce the cost of the out-of-pocket cost of investment in education among this minority who have been marginalized. As a result of that, this minority will be more likely to enroll in the education compared to those ethnic majority. Okay, especially for those children from the rural area. Children from the rural area remained less likely to enroll overall compared to children from the urban area. Why? Why? Okay, the children from the rural area less likely to enroll. Why? Even when the government has offered the education subsidy and also to exempt the tuition fee, why is it so, less likely for the children from the rural area to invest in the education? Now that could be because of the opportunity cost. Now just imagine if the children from the rural area were to invest in the education, that means that they have to leave their current job. If they're a child labor, they help out their family, okay? So if this child enters into the university or enters into the school, so there'll be one person less in the family who can be the source of the education, who can be the source of the income. So in this case, we expect that it will be less likely for those in the rural area to invest in their education, even when the government offers the educational subsidies or the tuition fees. So that is because of there is a larger unseen opportunity cost, the larger unseen opportunity cost for the children in the rural area. Okay, now in order to solve this problem, to reduce the opportunity cost, so the government should offer some other incentives or the financial assistance for those families in the rural area, who send their children to the university or send their children to the school. They'll be able to enjoy some tax benefit or tax reduction, or maybe some financial assistance from the government in order to help them to improve the source of income if the children were to enter into the university or were to enter or to enroll in the primary school or the secondary school. So this article tells us that besides exempting the tuition fee or besides offering the educational subsidies, at the same time, we have to we have to address the problem of the increasing opportunity cost, especially for those who are in the rural area. Because if the opportunity cost is not addressed, if it's not reduced, it will be less likely for people to invest in the education, just like the case in Vietnam, where the children from the rural area will be less likely to enroll in the school compared to those in the urban area, because it will be higher opportunity cost for children at the rural area compared to those in the urban area. Okay. Now, another important idea about the opportunity cost is this article. This article published in the very top journal, the Journal of Human Resources it is a study in India. It is a study in India, okay, to examine the impact of this NREGS program. What is the NREGS program? That means National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Now, this is the act that actually offers 100 days of the manual labor to any rural household that demands for the job. Now, just imagine if you're in the rural area in India, so under this program, you're allowed to work for 100 days, and there's no difference in the salary between the man and the women. So if you're in the rural area, so it will be more likely for you to engage in this program and to join this program, and you'll be granted 100 days of work and you're going to get a salary. Now, this article actually questioned about the effectiveness of this policy. Now, this article tells us that when people is engaged in this policy or engaged in this program and to work for 100 days for a salary, so the impact is it will be less likely. It will be less likely for this person to enroll in the school. So that means this person has already spent their time working within that 100 days. Now, if you give up on this 100 days, if you don't work for the 100 days, you're going to lose this salary. That is in terms of the opportunity cost of schooling. So just imagine, if you were to study, you cannot work. Now, if you work, you cannot study. So that's why from this policy, it actually discourages the workers from India, especially in the rural area, to enroll in the university. Okay, so that's why this article tells us about the importance of the opportunity cost that serves as determinants for the investment in the education. Now, if you're not willing to give up on this job because of the salary that you're going to get, you're not willing to give up on this job. Having given up on this job means that you're going to lose on the salary, and that's called the opportunity cost. Now, just because of this workfare, just because of this policy that discourages people from studying or encourages people to work, all right? So it has come to that extent that people will be less likely to invest in the education following the implementation of this program. So this article tells us about the importance of opportunity cost of the schooling in determining the educational investment. What about the variation of the human capital by age? Now, the implication we have learned just now is that the younger generation will be more likely to invest in the human capital, whereas the older generation will be less likely to invest in the education. Well, that is in terms of the theory. But in terms of the reality, I can offer you this article. This article tells us that, yes, even though theoretically we say that the older generation will be less likely to invest in the education or invest in the training, but let's take it with a grain of salt, because it depends on the types of the training. It depends on the types of the training. It is not to say that the older generation will totally out of the investment. They're not interested to invest in the human capital after all. So it actually depends on the types of the training. Now just imagine this article tells us that if the older generation invests in those job-related courses, the on-the-job computer-based training, something that is not general, something that is not general, but something that is related to the job, related to his job. Just imagine, older generation, they also want to learn computer. And that computer actually is important for them to perform the daily routine. In order to be relevant and in order to be not to be left behind and not to be competed away by the younger generation who is technology savvy. So this older generation, while they're still in the job market, they'll be more likely to invest in the education, to invest in the training, especially the training that is related to the job. This article tells us it is not to say that the older generation doesn't want to invest in the human capital, just like what the theory had mentioned, had proposed, but it's just that there's no relevant training. So the lesson we have learned from this article is that in order to be appealing to the older generation, the human capital or the training program in a company must be tailored to, it must be designed to suit the preference of the older generation, to see what is really needed by the older generation. The training must be something related to the job. It must be technical. It must be something related to the job, like the computer-based training. By offering this training, the older generation will be more interested to invest in the human capital. Okay, so this is another idea about how age affects the enrollment in the human capital. Sorry, the enrollment in the education. Okay, now, we also have some other implications of the human capital theory, like the labor force continuity. Okay, the labor force continuity. So if you expect to work with a longer period of time, all right, if you expect to work for a longer period of time, once you have graduated from the university, you want to work for another 30 years before you retire. Okay, so that is called labor force continuity. All right, so it will be more likely for you to invest in the education. But if you want to stay at home once you've got your PhD, once you've got your bachelor's degree, and if you want to stay at home, right? Okay, as a mother, as a woman, if you want to stay at home after getting married, you want to stay at home to take care of the children, take care of your husband, and you want to be detached from the labor market, no, don't do that. You have already invested in the education. Ladies and gentlemen, especially ladies, you have already invested in the education. Ladies, you have already invested in the education. So that's why you have to make full use of what you have learned in the university. Okay, men and women are equal in the job market. So in this case, you have to make full use of what you have learned in the university. Don't just stay at home. Yes, you can take care of your children, but at the same time, you still can develop your career as a woman. Okay, as an educated woman. You are educated. You're at the university right now. You are educated. So you should expect yourself to be investing for your future. And therefore, you need to develop your own career in the future. So don't stay at home. You have to work. If you work, you can improve the productivity of your country. You can improve the productivity of Indonesia. All right. If you stay at home, if you don't work, the productivity of Indonesia will never be increased. Okay, remember this. So if you intend to work, definitely you will be more likely to invest in the education. So that is the idea. All right. And the earnings differentials as well. The higher the salary, the higher the earnings, because it compensates for the number of years that is left to recoup your investment, which is why if you have got a PhD, your salary will definitely be higher than those with a master or even with a bachelor's, because just how many years you have to spend to get your PhD. And just imagine how many years left for you to recoup the investment once you've got your PhD. Definitely to compensate for you for the time you have spent in getting a PhD, definitely the salary must be higher. All right, so that's the earnings differential. Another implication is about the size of the earnings differentials. Now, very often we learn that now, even though you have graduated from the university, now maybe you will see that the salary that you obtained may not be as high as those who had graduated from the university maybe 10 years ago or even 20 years ago. It seems like the salary is low, or maybe the job opportunities for you as a high skilled workers is relatively less. Why? Because there is an influx, there is an increase in the total supply of the high skilled workers or the highly educated workers into the job market. Now just imagine, look around. I'm sure all of you are in the lecture hall right now. Look on your left, look on your right, to the front and to the back. There's so many students out there. Now, these are the students who are going to graduate maybe 1 or 2 years later to add on to the existing pool of workers in the Indonesian labor market. Now, just imagine the analysis of the demand and supply tells us when the supply is increased, what happens to the price? When the total supply of something is increased, the price of that thing will drop, will depress. Okay, so that's why when the supply of the high skilled workers or the supply of the highly educated workers, just like you, is increased, more and more workers are highly educated. So you can imagine the wage that is offered to this worker will be relatively low. The starting pay will be relatively low, so low to an extent that it will not be appealing to people to invest in the university because the return cannot cover the expenses. All right, so that is the implication. But of course, you need to have something to offer to the job market, especially in the fourth industrial revolution. You need to have the skills like the artificial intelligence, the 3D printing, the ability of cloud computing, e-commerce. All these are important skills in the fourth industrial revolutions. If you have what it takes in the job market, so definitely you will be still relevant to the job market. So under this situation, you'll be, you're more marketable. You're more marketable. All right. So definitely your salary can be increased. Now, another thing is that you need to have the internship. You need to have the work experience before you step into the job market. Yes, Anissa Maharami, you raise your hand. If you have any problem, please turn on your mic and speak up. Anis, you have any question? No? Or you accidentally activate? No. No. Okay. So can I continue? All right. Now, the size of the earnings differentials tells us that when the supply of the high skilled workers or the highly educated workers is increased. So in this case, the returns from being highly educated will be lower. And as a result of that, the size of the earnings differentials will be shrunk. It will be shrunk. It will be reduced to an extent that it will not be attractive for people to invest in the education. Just like what is explained by this theory or by this graph, you can see that now this is the wage differential between the college educated workers and the high school educated workers. The salary of the ratio of the salary of the high school, the ratio of the salary of the college student and the salary of those graduating from the high school. All right, now look at that. If it is high, okay, at this level, so this is the amount of the college student. Now just imagine, this is relatively high. Okay, therefore, we can see that the gap between the earning stream of college educated persons and the high school graduate, okay, the gap will be large because the salary is high for the graduate student, all right, or the college student. So the gap between the earning stream of the college graduate and the high school graduate will be greater. And that just because of that, many people are attracted by the rate of returns of the education. And which is why more and more people want to enter into the university with the hope of getting higher salary, just like the seniors. So in this case, we will see that the supply of the the college student will be increased. As a result of that, the wage offered to the college student will be lower. Lower to an extent that the future earnings for those with the college qualification will be lower as well. And as such, the larger gap now become shrunk. It has shrunk. It has reduced to an extent that when this process goes on, it seems like there is indifferent. It's indifferent between college enrollment and working after the high school. Then why should we invest in the education if that's the case? So that's the implication from the theory of the human capital. Now, the idea behind it is that how are we going to ensure the wage for those who have the college education to remain high enough to motivate people to continue investing in the education, just like what you're doing right now? How are we going to ensure the gap here is large enough in order to motivate people to continue investing in the education? We have to ensure that the wage obtained by the college educated person, or the gap, the difference between the wage earned by the college educated person and the high school leaver, it must be huge difference in order to attract people to invest in the education. But how are we going to ensure that the wage is high? And definitely it's going to be a policy from the government. Any government, every government in this country, every government must make sure the high-skilled workers must be paid adequately. The salary that is paid to the workers must commensurate with the qualification. But how are we going to ensure that the wage is commensurate with the qualification? Of course, minimum wage can be one of the concern, can be one of the criterion. Okay, it can be one of the criteria. All right. Well, maybe a country can attract foreign direct investment, foreign direct investors, more foreign direct investors to be attracted. And the foreign direct investments must be of higher quality. It must be of higher quality to bring in the technology into the country, to transfer the technology into a country, and to create more job opportunities that can actually capitalize or leverage on the high-skilled workers. Only by then, the increasing supply of the college workers can be absorbed into the labor market in this country, thanks to the foreign investors to open up the opportunities, the job opportunities for these increasing college graduates. Only by then, these college graduates will be paid accordingly or adequately. And only by then, there is a value for people to invest in the education. Okay, now take a look at the journal article. I like to share the journal articles with the students because theory is theory. So we want to bring our theory into practice. One of the many ways for us to bring it into practice is by doing research. So that's why the research is reported in the journal articles. So look at that. This article actually tells us about the labor force continuity. Now, if someone expects to work for a longer period of time, so it will be more likely for people to enroll in the education, and it can be reflected by this journal article through the maternal gender role attitude. Now, this article tells us about the intergenerational transmission of gender role attitudes. So that means in this case, if your mother hold a non-traditional attitudes towards working or towards studying, it can actually encourage or motivate the children, or even the son-in-law or maybe the daughter-in-law to work. So if let's say you have an open-minded mother, if your mother is non-traditional, if your mother holds the non-traditional attitude, now she will encourage the daughter to achieve higher level of the education and to encourage the daughter to work, to spend more time in the job market. Now, only by then, when the daughter decides to spend more time in the job market, only by then, the daughter will be spending more time to invest in the education because she wants to stay for a longer period of time in the job market, thanks to her mother. thanks to her mother. And that all, not just for the daughter, but it's also for the son's wife, which is the daughter-in-law. Okay, so if let's say the mother-in-law is very open-minded, and she holds the non-traditional attitude, so she will encourage the daughter-in-law to study or to work with ease of mind, because the mother tells her, well, I can take care of the children. You can go work with ease of mind and let mother take care of the children. Let me take care of the children. So that is the open-minded mother. So under this situation, the mother's attitude towards the gender role will be transmitted to the children, to the daughter, and even to the daughter-in-law or the wife. Okay, so that is the intergenerational transmission of gender role attitudes. With that transmission of the gender role attitudes, can the daughter and the daughter-in-law be investing in the education and to spend more time in the job market? So that is to resonate, that is to explain this point. If you have decided to spend more time in the job market, you'll be more likely to invest in the education. All right. Now, another article talks about the wage, this point, the earnings differential. The higher the level of the education, the higher the earnings. Okay, now this article tells us, yes, the importance about the education, because education can actually improve the salary, yes. But to a certain extent, the higher level of the education, just because of so many people graduating from the education, it comes to an extent that the returns to the education seems to be lower, especially in China. So this article, this study was conducted in China, just when we thought how important the human capital is. All right, and that's why we invest in the human capital. And all of a sudden, after that, once we have graduated from the university, the salary is lower for those university graduates. Why? Because there's so many people with a higher level of the education. So as a result of that, we say that the returns to the schooling seem to be lower. Now, the average returns to the schooling seem to be lower, but whether it now, even when it is lower, what makes you stand out? What makes you stand out of the crowd is not about the education. This article tells us about not just the education that matters. There are some other aspects that's also important as well. So for example, in this case, getting a university diploma and with a good command of English language skills, now these persons will continue to enjoy a high wage returns. Now, when we say that the university qualification itself may not increase the salary or may not improve the rate of returns to the education, what else can be leveraged in order for us to improve our rate of returns? So in this case, this article tells us the importance of the English proficiency. Yeah, especially for those at the urban area and those located in the coastal region. So they are in need of the English as well, because this is the area where a lot of the foreign direct investors are investing there. So in this case, they need to have a good command of English in order to stay competent, in this area. Now, with a good command of English, coupled with the educational qualification, so in this case, you can actually work hand in hand to increase the labor market returns. So this is what the article mentioned. So finally, well, we learned about, at this point, we learned about the size of the earnings differential. The earnings differential will be reduced. Yeah, the earnings differential will be reduced if the supply of the workers, supply of the highly educated workers is increased. Yes. Now, in this case, this article tells us not just the supply of the workers, not just the supply of the workers, will cause a change in the structure of the wage, but the demand from the employer will also change the structure of the wage. Okay, so this article tells us that the changes in the labor supply contributed significantly to the decline of the experience and education premium. So just when we say that the educated persons will definitely be getting higher salary, those with the experience will be getting higher salary, but through the increase in the labor supply, it will definitely reduce the demand. Sorry, it will definitely reduce the premium from the education, and the premium, which is the salary increase from the education, and the salary increase from the experience. Okay, now another reason is that the demand for the experience shifted in favor of the younger workers. Now, younger workers. So when the employer prefers the younger workers and not to prefer the older workers, so it will be more likely for the salary of the older workers to be reduced, okay? Or any skill premium to be reduced, because now the older workers will no longer be prioritized in the hiring process, but the younger workers is more prioritized in the hiring process. So therefore, now the demand for the younger generation, coupled with the increase in the labor supply, has caused a drop in the wage premium from the education. So this article actually tells us another perspective. Why is the size of the earnings differential smaller? Not just because of the increase in the labor supply, but at the same time, the decrease in the demand for the high-skilled workers and the increase in the demand for the relatively low-skilled workers and the younger generation. Now, up to this point, do you have any other thing to ask me? You have anything to ask me? You have anything to ask me? No? Now, let us continue with our lecture. We've learned about the human. Yes.
May I answer?
Yes, Raina. Yes, Dr. Raina.
Yeah. Thank you first for the material about the human capital. As you tell us about the theory and the reality, sir.
Yes.
How we can count the MRR to apa ya, untuk for the guest the student to make the option continuing studies or quite find a job. Have you ever or have articles about the to count the MRR, that the conclusion that you tell us before, MRR greater from R. Is it, sir?
Yes, that is what I'm going to explain later. Yeah, that's what I'm going to explain later to calculate the MRR. Yes, we can actually calculate the MRR through many ways. One of the many ways for us to calculate the MRR is through using the regression method. We have to use the regression method, the Minserian wage equation, and to calculate the coefficient for the schooling. So from the beta, the coefficient itself, it can actually tell us about the rate of returns to the education. So we will come into that later.
Okay.
In just a bit. Yeah, we'll come into that in just a bit. Okay. Now,
thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Now, okay, let me just continue with my lecture. Okay, let me share my screen once again. Am I still sharing my screen? No, not yet. Can you see my screen?
Okay.
Okay, now we will come into that and how to calculate the MRR later in just a bit. Now, before we go on, so I want to compare, I want to bring your attention to another theory. Now, we have already learned about the human capital theory. We know that the human capital investment is important because it can improve the productivity and in turn, it can actually improve the salary. Yes, you're right, we are right. But at the same time, now sometimes people may not consider human capitals. People may not consider education as the human capital because the education is just viewed as a screening device for us to filter or to select the best worker. Okay, so that's why sometimes even when you have obtained a higher level of the education, it doesn't mean that it can actually serve as a human capital that can help you to improve the labor productivity. But the education serves as a signal. It just serves as a signal to tell your boss to how productive you are. So through your educational qualification, your boss can actually infer your productivity because your boss will have the expectation, okay, this person has graduated from a university. I must expect that what kind of a knowledge and what kind of a productivity that is brought by a person who is graduated from a university. So this is the mindset, this is the expectation from the employer. So that's why your education qualification, your certificate serves as a signal. It serves as a signal to the boss in order to filter who has the potential, who is expected to have a higher productivity. And under that situation, the education itself may not be increasing the labor productivity, but the education itself actually serves as a signal to tell how productive a worker is. Therefore, here comes another theory called the screening theory, or the screening view of education, especially in the job competition model, because the education is considered to be a tool for us to compete for the job, which is why more and more people want to invest in the postgraduate, master, or even in the PhD. Okay, so because in this case, now, if you have got a master's qualification, you think that you will stand. I'm sorry. You have forgotten to mute your mic. Please check your mic. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. All right. Now, so it will come to us that now, if you invest in the education, so at the same time, well, the education will serve as a signal to tell the boss how productive you are. Okay, so which is why from time to time, more and more people likes to invest in the education, until to an extent that there will be a term called the over-education or the education inflation, because the education is too much for a person. It's even greater than what is required by the job. But people just use education as a signal to tell the employer how productive they are. What is the productivity level that the employer can ever expect on him? So that is called screening. The education may not help to improve the productivity, but it can serve as a tool for us to screen a worker with the university qualification compared to those workers with just an A level. So who do you want to hire? So definitely the former. The first one with the university qualification will stand out of a chance. Okay, but of course it's subject to the social debate. Now, if the education serves as a signal that does not improve any productivity, but it just serves as a signal for the employer to pick the right person, then why should the government be spending so much money on the education if it does not improve the productivity? It just serves as a signal. Why should the government spend so much money on the education if it does not improve the productivity? So that is the reason, that is the debate in the social, because of the difference between the human capital and the screening. All right, so whether the education serves as a human capital or a screening device? That depends. And this article tells us education serves as a signal, especially in terms of MBA, Master of Business Administration. Now, you know, when we enroll into the master in the MBA, very often, now many universities require some work experience. Yeah, you need to have some work experience before you're enrolled to the master. Okay, so therefore, for those who attend the master, the MBA course, he or she must have had some work experience, or even the CEO, the manager in the company, return to the school in order to get an MBA so that, you know, they have this qualification. Now, very often, the MBA, very often, this student just want to get a paper qualification. What they have actually is the work experience, the practical experience. But what they are lacking at is the paper qualification. With the paper qualification, maybe he or she will be able to get promoted to the next level. So maybe the boss tells him, the human resource department tells him or her, now you have the work experience, but you do not have the qualification. Now I want you to get a master's qualification in order for you to strengthen your opportunities to be promoted to the next level. Now just imagine if you're a manager or a CEO in a company, but you're without an MBA. So you're not convincing, even though you have the work experience, but you're not convincing because you don't have the education qualification. So under that situation, we say that the MBA itself actually serves as the screening device, or it really plays the role to improve the productivity. Now, this article tells us that the MBA actually plays the role as the screening device because it tells us that those who obtain the MBA, it serves as a signal to tell the boss how productive they are. And the work experience that they have accumulated from year to year before they enroll into the MBA actually played a role to improve the salary. So therefore, after they have obtained the MBA, it is not the MBA that has caused the salary to increase, but it is the work experience, the past work experience accumulated from year to year that has caused the wage to be increased. Therefore, in this article, it tells us about the importance of signaling or the screening as an analysis, as an explanation of explaining why salary is higher for the MBA, because the MBA serves as a signal to tell the boss how productive he or she is. Okay, so that is it. All right, that is it. So in this article, we say that the MBA actually serves as a signal. But of course, in this article itself, it tells us about the importance of the work experience. The work experience is important in terms of improving the productivity. And at the same time, it's important as a signal to tell the boss about the productivity of the workers. Now, work experience. This article tells us about the work experience that is gained through the vocational education training. This article tells us about the importance of going for the internship. Okay, now the internship itself actually can improve the productivity of the worker. And this can be explained by the human capital investment theory. And at the same time, the internship or the work experience gained through the vocational education training also serves as a signal to the boss about how productive a person is. Therefore, in this case, with the work experience, the salary can be increased. And the salary increase can be explained partially by the improvement in the productivity, which is explained by the human capital theory. And at the same time, it can be explained by the improvement in the salary that is due to the fact that someone has obtained has gone through the internship. All right. So that's why when people hires a person, when he knows that this person has got a work experience, or maybe he has graduated from the vocational education and training center. So that's why in this case, it serves as a signal to tell the boss how relevant the skill set he has, okay, with the job requirement. All right, so this article tells us the importance about these two theories, human capital theory and the signaling or the screening theory, in order to explain, to relate the education with the schooling, Okay, now in this article, now in this aspect, I would like to draw your attention. Now, later on, I will come to how do we measure the MRR right after this. Okay. Now, we always emphasize about, now for the past 2 hours, you may understand that, understand the importance of the human capital in improving the salary. Yes, human capital is important, but not everybody can achieve that amount of education. All right, so it depends on the ability. Now, sometimes a better able person will be more likely to invest in education compared to those who are less able. And therefore, the salary that is obtained by the person with the higher education is greater. The greater the level of the education, the greater the earnings. But the increase in the earnings, can we say that the increase in the earnings is 100% due to the fact that this person has got this higher level of the education? Not really, because it is the ability that has caused someone to be educated, to invest in the education. And just because of having invested in the education, and now the salary is increased. So we cannot say for sure it is the education that improves the salary, but in fact, it is the ability, the innate ability, ya, kebolehan semula jadi, the innate ability seseorang, the innate ability of someone that can actually encourage this person to invest in their education, which in turns improve the earnings. Now, how are we going to view that? We can view that with two different situations. We assume that we have two different persons with the same MRR. Same MRR means that the marginal rate of returns of the education, which I'm going to show you how it is calculated later, okay? Now, the MRR here is downward sloping. Now, we assume that there are two persons, let's say the A and the B, individual A and the individual B, all right? The individual A, L, and Bo. Yeah, individual A and B faced with the same rate of returns. All right, so that means both of them have the same ability. Remember, the MRR also shows the ability. Okay, now in this case, both of A and the B have the same ability, and the returns from the investment will be the same for them. The only difference is the R. Now just imagine the R actually has, the R for the individual A is relatively high. High means that this person is present-oriented. As a result of that, as a present-oriented person, he will be more likely to invest less in the education. Okay, you have already learned that because it's present-oriented. So therefore, he invests just 11 years of the education. While for another person who has a lower R, lower R means that he's future-oriented. Okay, all right, and in this case, the financial ability for this person is relatively stronger. Therefore, this person will be more likely, yeah, to invest in the education. Therefore, this person will be more likely to have a greater present value of the investment in education. And as such, there is an increase in the year of schooling. Now, from here, we know that the B, individual B invests 12 years of education, whereas individual A invests 11 years of education. This is not because of their ability, because their ability will be the same. The only difference is their ability in getting the financial resources. Now, when we plot this graph, we can actually draw the which schooling locus. This is the which schooling locus. Remember the which schooling locus, remember the slope of the which schooling locus tells us about the MRR. I've explained to you just now. So that's why in this case, we only have one wage schooling locus for two persons, for A and for B. Okay, because we only have one MRR for him, for these two persons. Now, when the individual A invests 11 years, he deserves to get this much of the salary. And the individual B invests in 12 years, he deserves to get this much of the salary. Now, the question is, if the individual A, who is equally capable just like the B, all right, it's just that the A doesn't have the opportunity to study, okay, because financially he's not able to invest. That's why he's only investing less amount of the schooling. Now, just imagine if A is given the same opportunity just like the B to achieve another one more year of the education. What is the potential salary that he could have obtained? He could have obtained this much of the salary. So from here, we can see that if the government increase one more year of education, or by encouraging this person to invest one more year in the education, so it is expected that this person, which is A, is expected to get this much of the salary, just like the both. Okay, that is because that the ability is the same. We only have one MRR curve here, and we only have one wage schooling locus over here. Now, just imagine the only difference is the difference in terms of the rate of discount. Now, just imagine if you have a different situation where people have a different ability. For this person, B, he has a greater ability compared to the A. A has a less ability. All right. So therefore, the marginal rate of returns from the education will be greater for someone who has greater ability. He can actually earn more money if he has the greater ability on top of his education. And whereas for the A's, he earns less salary. The rate of returns to the education is relatively low for the A. Now that shows we have two different wage schooling locus for A and B. Now, under this situation, we say that the discount rate will be the same. All right, we assume that the ability to get the financial resources will be the same. Okay, so the A and the B actually gets the government assistance. So that's why the R is the same. The ability to get the financial resources will be the same for A and B. The only difference is the ability between the A and the B. Now, a less able person will be more likely to obtain just 11 years, and a more able person will be more likely to obtain 12 years. 12 years. So in this case, we can actually draw a wage schooling locus just like this. Individual A with the 11 years of education, the salary is this much. Whereas individual B with this much of education, 12 years of education, he deserves to get this much of the salary. Now the question is, should the government encourage individual A to invest one more year of education, just like the B, with the hope that the A could have obtained as a salary that is as high as the B once he has graduated from one more year later? No, because if the A obtained one more year of the education, at most, he will be able to get the salary as high as this much only, which is a WAs. Okay, and it is still lower than the HS. So it's not to say that if a person invests in one more year of extra year of education, he or she will be getting the same salary just like the people who already has 12 years of education. What makes the difference is that maybe the B has another ability that has caused him to be able to get higher salary, even when the individual A has obtained one more year of education, yet it does not increase the salary as high as the B. Therefore, in this case, this is called the unobserved ability. It's called the unobserved ability. All right, we cannot observe the ability. So that's why in our model, we have to acknowledge the importance of the ability. So therefore, in the standard equation, now this is what I'm talking about. This is the way for us to measure the marginal rate of returns to the schooling. There's so many different ways that I just focus on the regression method, because this is the method that you're going to probably use to measure the contribution or the rate of returns of the education. Now, this is a Minserian-Wich equation. The dependent variable is the W. The dependent variable is the W, which is the wage. And the independent variable is the schooling, the year of schooling. Now, we are going to estimate the coefficient for the schooling. So we estimate the B. The B here reflects the coefficient that can be used to estimate the rate of returns of extra year of schooling. So if you differentiate the log wage with respect to the schooling, you're going to get the B. The B here itself is the marginal rate of returns to the education. Okay, the marginal rate of returns to the education in terms of mathematics. All right, but of course we have to add some other variables as well. For example, we have to add the ability, because I mentioned here the ability can also improve the salary, not just the schooling, but the ability. For example, your communication skill, your problem-solving skill, so on and so forth, which is why in this article, it tells us the importance about the cognitive ability, which is the ability to understand, to comprehend, the ability to memorize, the ability on the numeracy skills. All these are the high order cognitive skills that actually can work hand in hand with the education in order to improve the returns to the schooling. So that's why in this case, the ability should enter into the formula over here besides the S in order for us to calculate the rate of returns correctly. Now, just because the rate of return, just because of skills is important, the ability is important. My research published in the International Labour Organization, published in, okay. So my research published in the International Labour Review shows the importance about the ability on the returns to the over and the under education. Now, over education, what is the meaning of over education and the under education? Over education means that you have the education level that is greater than what is required by your job. Under education means that your educational attainment is lower than what is required by your job. Of course, you will never get the higher salary, so there will be a wage penalty. There will be a wage penalty if you're the overeducated or undereducated, because you're not equally educated. You're not achieving the required amount of the education. So that's why in this case, how does the ability help in order to reduce the deficiency in terms of the wage penalty from the overeducation or the undereducation? So that's why in this case, the ability helps to improve the returns of this miseducation, education mismatch. Now, my research shows that even though you don't have what it takes to hold this position, you're undereducated. Now, for as long as you are trained specifically, you attend training, you have the specific ability, you have the job-specific workplace ability. And this job-specific workplace ability is something, it is the skill that is related to your daily routine. Like, for example, the computer skill, okay? What is needed by your job is called the job-specific skill. The skill that is related to your job is the job-specific skill. Now, if you improve on this skill, you'll be able to correct on the wage penalty. The wage penalty resulted from the education mismatch. So from here, we know how important education is besides the we know how important ability is besides the education. Okay, so as a result of that, the training is very important in order for us to work hand in hand with our education in order to improve the returns from the education. When you graduate from the university, you're the university graduate, and your salary is this much. And the knowledge you have learned from the university will be obsolete one day in the future. So what makes you to be more relevant, to be competent, to stay relevant in the job market is the knowledge and also the skills you possess. And where could you possibly learn the skill? And it's through the workplace. And which is why it brings us to the next topic. It is the post-school human capital investment, which focuses on the investment in the labor market, and it's done by the employer through the training. Now, maybe we take maybe a 5 minutes break, 5 minutes break, a 5 minutes break, and 5 minutes later we'll be back. Maybe a few minutes break. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Pada para mahasiswa silakan dipersiapkan pertanyaannya ya, yang berkaitan dengan teori dan juga ada beberapa jurnal.
Hi, I'm back. Can you still hear me and can you still see my slide? Hello, can you still hear? Okay, now let me continue. Now before the break we mentioned about this post okay. Now, before the break, we mentioned about the post-school human capital investment. We mentioned about the importance of training as another form of the human capital investment in the job market. And of course, it's handled by the employer. The employer will send the workers for the training. And the training is important because it will improve the labor productivity. In turn, the salary can be increased and the profitability can be increased as well. So therefore, how is the education related to the training? Past studies have already shown that the higher the level of the education, the higher the amount of training, because those persons, workers who are highly educated, will be more likely to invest in the training. He has the basic knowledge he has learned in the university. So these are the persons who will be more likely to engage in training, to attend more training. Now imagine next time when you've graduated from the university, so you are the human capital. You are going to be the human capital or human asset to your company. So therefore, with your knowledge as a basic, as a fundamental, so it will actually enable you to attend training, and you will understand more on the training. And just because of the work requirement, your job requirement, so you need to attend more training. Now, with your knowledge that you have learned from the university, you will absorb the content from the training better. So that's why a high-skilled workers, highly educated workers will be more likely to spend more time on the training, okay, in order to be high-skilled workers. So there is the complementarity between the investment in the education and the investment in the on-the-job training, because a highly educated person will be more likely to invest in the training. Okay, invest in the training after the school. Now, what is the implication of the on-the-job training? Since we know the training is very important, so what is the implication about it? Now, when you attend training, it will reduce the employee turnover. Why? Because especially if the training is very specific, all right, if you attend the types of training that is only relevant to the company where you obtain the training from, so therefore the training, the knowledge you have learned will only be applicable to this particular company. Once you have stepped out from this company, it will no longer be brought into practice, or it will no longer be brought into use. So therefore, this is called the specific training. Now, what is the impact of the specific training? It will actually reduce the turnover. It will be less likely for you to leave your company, because after leaving the company, you will not be able to leverage on the specific skill set that you have had. Therefore, in the past studies, one past studies mentioned the on-the-job training, off-the-job training, distance training, job tenure, or even the education job or skill job matches. All these training, these different types of the training that match the education with the job and match the skills with the job will be more likely to have a negative impact on the turnover intention. Now, people who have been equipped with this kind of a training will be less likely to leave the company, because after leaving the company, so maybe some other companies may not be able to capitalize on this training, and you will not be productive in some other company, because the knowledge you have learned is only specific to your company. You only can improve your productivity at the existing company, but not at another company. So in this case, for those persons who have obtained the specific on-the-job training, it will be less likely for this person to leave this company, to seek for the greener pastures, look for better opportunities out there. Another implication of the on-the-job training is about the minimum wage. Minimum wage. Now, how is the minimum wage related to training? Now, when the minimum wage is paid, it will be less likely for the on-the-job training to be offered, because the minimum wage is actually an increasing cost of employment. It is an increasing cost of hiring. Now, just imagine if the employer has already allocated the budget for hiring and has less budget left for training. So therefore, the minimum wage may have a negative impact on the training. All right, and it is also not profitable for the firms to provide some trainings, especially for the younger worker, because the younger workers is subject to the minimum wage. Once they receive the training and being paid the minimum wage, and the productivity is low, it is not worth it for the employer. It's not worth it for the employer. And after all, these workers tend to leave the company after learning the skills from this company, after receiving the minimum wage from this company, and the worker leaves the company, and now it's going to be a loss to the employer. Therefore, when the minimum wage is paid, the employers are less likely to offer training. That's the implication of the on-the-job training. And it is reflected in one of the articles over here. This article tells us the minimum wage actually, for the firm that complied with the minimum wage, the minimum wage actually reduces the training by 11 to 23% because the minimum wage serves as an increasing cost. It is a burden of the cost of hiring for the employer. So the employer will have to make some adjustment to the hiring or to the human resource management. One of the adjustments could be reducing the fringe benefit or to reducing the training, the budget for the training, because the budget has already been allocated to paying higher salary in terms of the minimum wage. All right, so that is it's proven in the past study. It's proven by the past studies. Okay, now another implication is about the internal labor market. Now, what has the internal labor market to do with the training? Now, the training will actually give birth to the internal labor market. Internal labor market means that the employer will actually source internally when it comes to promotion. The workers at the lower level will be promoted one rung above, okay? And yes, now maybe the assistant manager will be promoted to the manager once the manager has retired, or once the manager has left or has retired. So the assistant manager will be promoted one rung above, okay, to hold the managerial position. And the executive will be promoted one level up to hold the position as the assistant manager. Okay, so this is called the internal labor market. The employer will not source out. The employer will not look for the workers outside of the company, but to look for the workers inside of the company within the same department. It's just through promotion. Why? Because of the training. Because in the same department, definitely you'll be trained with all the job scope within the same department. For example, the finance department. It can be a finance clerk, it can be the account clerk, a financial officer, a financial executive, financial manager, assistant manager, or financial director. Okay, so in finance director. So in this case, now every level of the position is expected to possess certain amount of the skill. In this case, those who are holding the highest position is expected to have the greatest amount of the skill. Now, where did he learn the skill from? He learned the skill from bottom up. So that means he must have already learned from the bottom as a clerk. Maybe 20 years ago, he was a clerk. And then he was promoted to the officer and to become the executive and to become the assistant manager and director. So that means the training is important within a department in order to facilitate for promotion within the internal labor market. Okay, so that is how training is related to the internal labor market, and how training is related to the indeterminacy of the wages. Indeterminacy of the wages means that once you have got the training, you have the bargaining power. You can bargain. Now, with the qualification, if you only have a bachelor's degree, don't you ever bargain with the boss, because the salary is going to be fixed for you. Okay, it's already fixed for you. Now, you are the fresh graduate. You don't have the work experience. You haven't had the work experience yet. So therefore, you need to have some experience first. You need to be well-trained first before you have what it takes to negotiate with the employer. So that's why for those who have attended the training, maybe from this company or from another previous companies through the past experience, so all this will come into picture to help him to negotiate with the employer. So the implication of the training is the ability of negotiating the wage or bargaining the wage with the employer. So the indeterminacy of the wage means that the wage is not fixed for those who have the training. The wage can be determined through the negotiation for those who have got this type of the training, which is desired, which is demanded, or required by the employer. All right, let's take a look at the past studies on this. Now, this article is about the relevance of the internal labor market and see how training can improve the job promotion for those in the military, okay? Now, if you have the work experience, or if you have some experience, or maybe you have been exposed to the internship, all right, internship, or maybe some work experience in the military, okay? Now, what is the importance of the military education that has been exposed to you at the school? And this skill actually can improve, well, this skill can actually, now this is the vocational training and the school to work program, and the occupation specific training received from this program reduces the early turnover. Now, this article tells us that if you have the skills that is needed by your occupation, it will be more likely for you to stay in that company, okay? And it will be less likely for you to leave the company, because this occupation-specific training that you have received from the school, okay, that is related to your job, will reduce the early turnover, and it will improve the long-run job stability for those who choose the job that is related to what they have been trained. So that's why it's important for us to find an occupation that is relevant to what we have been trained in the school. So if you're able to find a job that is relevant to what you have been trained in the school, so it will reduce your turnover, you will have less likelihood to leave the company because you're satisfied with your job. And it can actually improve your long-term job stability. Long-term job stability. You will work longer period of time for that position because you choose the job that reflects what you have been trained in the school. Okay, so that is the importance about, now it can actually help you for the promotion as well, because the skill can be learned from the school as well as from your workplace. If you stay in the same position, you'll be going up, moving up to the job ladder, and this is the internal labor market, because in this for this company, or maybe within the military, within the military, all right, so the promotion will be based on level, okay? So the level junior officer to the senior officer, you know, something like this. So if you have the skill set trained at the school and trained at the workplace, so it will actually improve your opportunity to move up to the job ladder, and you're no longer thinking of leaving your company, and you're going to have a longer job stability. Longer run job stability can be improved thanks to the training. They can actually help people to move up the job ladder within the internal labor market. Lastly, about the indeterminacy of the wage. Now, from here, we say that if you have got the training, now, are you able to negotiate with the employer? Yes, it is. The article tells us that wage bargaining is more relevant for those who are educated and for those who are with the skills that is relevant to the job, the jobs with the special requirements through the skills, through the training. Now, if you have what it takes, then you are able to negotiate, to bargain with the employer. So therefore, in this case, the wage bargaining is more relevant for those who are highly educated and for those who are well trained, and for those who have the specific skills that are needed by the employer. And only by then, these persons will be able to negotiate with the employer, and the wage bargaining model will be more relevant to explain why did this person get this salary. Okay, now for those for which posting means that it is a situation where people are offered the fixed salary without any experience, fixed salary. So it will be more likely for which posting to be the way which is determined. And it will be more likely for which bargaining to be the way which is determined for those who have the training. So this article tells us about the importance of training as well as the education in order to enhance the chance of, the opportunity, enhance the likelihood of bargaining with the employer for the wage. Otherwise you're going to get the fixed salary. Now, if you're undergoing the apprenticeship, it will be less likely for you to negotiate because you're just learning. You're still learning. You have not mastered the skill yet. You're still learning. Therefore, you're not able to negotiate. The negotiation, the wage bargaining is only applicable for those who have the specific skill that is required by the job market. Okay, now, another implication of the on-the-job training is about the age earnings profile. You still remember just now I mentioned to you about how the age earnings profile look like? This is the age earnings profile. All right, this is the age. This is the salary, the earnings. At the lower age, when you're young, your salary is lower. When you're at the older age, your salary will be higher. But the increase in the salary is at a decreasing rate. There is a diminishing returns. Why? Why is the age earnings profile concave? Because of the human capital theory, because of training as well. Now, we can actually use training to explain why is the age earnings profile concave. Why do the younger workers earn greater salary? Sorry, why do the younger workers earn lower salary at the beginning? And the salary is increased at an increasing rate. And when someone gets older, the salary will be higher. It will be higher, but the increase is at a decreasing rate. Why? Because it depends on the timing where your training is obtained. The timing where the training is obtained. Now, just imagine, do you think you will spend your time to attend more training while you only have a year or two before you retire? Compared to if you're young, in the early 20s, do you think you will spend more time on training? Yes, you are. You will. Because at the younger age, once you attended the training, you know that the training that you have attended now will benefit you for an even longer period of time throughout your lifetime. But for those who are approaching the retirement age, who are only having 1 or 2 years left before the retirement age, do you think this person will be, spending their time giving up their salary just to attend the training, or just to attend the education, just to invest in the education? So that is the reason why people at the younger age will be more likely to invest in the training, because they know they're still young, they can absorb more knowledge, and that knowledge can benefit them in the longer period of time. The knowledge, the skill they have learned right now at the age of 20 will benefit them for the entire life, assuming that the skill does not depreciate. Assuming that the skill does not depreciate. Now, compared to someone who are nearing the retirement age, these persons will not be likely to invest in education, to study at least a master or a PhD, because it's going to be shorter time for this person to recoup the investment, even after he has obtained the master or the PhD, or in the training as well. These persons who approach the retirement age will be less likely to invest in the training, because he may have this mindset: I'm going to retire. Why should I learn so much thing? After that, I'm going to be retiring. I'm going to retire. What is the point for me to pick up all these skills? Might as well just let the youngsters to pick up all these skills, because the youngsters will have a longer period of time to stay in the company. But no, not me. But I'm going to leave the company very soon. So which is the reason why, this is the reason why you can see that at the younger age, people will tend to invest more in the training. And at the same time, the salary is low. The salary is low. Therefore, in this case, in this case, when the salary is low, the opportunity cost that should be foregone is supposed to be low. Therefore, in this case, people will be more likely to invest more in training and pay more for the training, because he knows that he has a longer period of time to rent out the training throughout his lifetime, to make full use of the knowledge he has learned throughout his lifetime. The benefit from the training must be greater if he invested at a younger age, because he has a longer period of time for him to recoup the benefit. Compared to someone who's at the old age, this person will invest less and pay less for the training, because this person actually received higher salary at the age of 50. At the age of 50, this person is expected to invest less in the training because the salary is high for this person. So at the same time, he's going to be, he is already the manager, earning greater salary. So under this situation, do you think that this person will spend so much time to invest in the education or even to go for the training? And with that, that also means that he has to give up on his salary? No, no such thing, unless the training is sponsored by the employer. But if you want him to spend his money out of pocket, okay, so I don't think it's possible. All right, so therefore, he knows that he has a shorter period of time to rent out his knowledge or the training, in order to recoup the investment. So under this situation, people at this age will be less likely to invest in the education because of the time left for him to recoup the benefit of the investment of training before retirement, which is why the greater the amount of training that is invested at a younger age, the greater the increase in the salary, which is why you see that it is steeper over here. And at the older age, the amount of the training is supposed to be lower. The lower the amount of training that you have invested, what more can you expect? Of course, the salary increase will be small for you. Therefore, the salary increase over here, the salary increment over here will be relatively small. Yes, the salary in absolute value, it is higher here compared here. But in terms of the increase in the salary, it is greater here at a younger age compared to the older age, which is why the age earnings profile is concave, because older people had shorter duration for them to rent out their knowledge, to make full use, to capitalize on their skill. And it is reflected by the marginal revenue of investing in the training at the age of as early as 20, compared to the marginal revenue of investing in the training at the age of 30. Now, what is the marginal revenue? The marginal revenue is the additional revenue from investing in the training. So first year now, if you invest at the training at the age of 20, at the age of 20, you'll be able to get the R as the returns. As a return, R is the returns. The knowledge, the skills you have possessed can be rented out in the labor market at the R. R amount is the return from your training, okay? And we expect that to be constant. It's just an assumption, all right? Throughout your lifetime until the age of 64, until the age of 65 years old before you retire, okay? So at the age of 20 to the age of 65, so that will be 46 terms over here, 46 terms over here at the age of 20 to the age of 65 over here. So there will be elapsed. So there will be 46 terms elapsed between 20 years old and 65 years old, 46 terms. The first term shouldn't be discounted because it's a present value, all right? The second term here to be discounted, okay? It goes the same just like, the human capital. just like the human capital investment in the education. Now, of course, if you want to get the R here, the internal rate of return, you can actually use the Microsoft Excel to get, but it's not covered in this lecture. Okay, you can actually use the Microsoft Excel to find the R. Now, if you want to use the regression method, if you want to find the R using the calculation approach, you can actually use the regression method I've explained to you just now. Okay, now, so that means at the age of 20, you're going to work until the retirement age of 65, and there will be another 46 term for you to recoup the investment. Therefore, in this case, we have to calculate the revenue from 46 terms in the future. When we total it up, it becomes the marginal revenue of investing in the training at the age of 20 years old. If you invest in the training, that particular training itself will generate an additional benefit for you in the future for the coming 45 years in the future. Let's assume the training does not depreciate. The skill does not depreciate. So therefore, you can imagine at the age of 20, the skill you obtain at the age of 20 will generate a benefit to you throughout your lifetime as much as MR20. And if you obtain the skill at the age of 30, now you will have a shorter period of time. Remember this? You have a shorter period of time to rent out this knowledge, to rent out your skill to the job market. You're only left with 36 terms. You're only left with 36 terms for you to recoup the benefit of the training that you obtained at the age as old as 30. Of course, when you total it up, you will see that the MR30 is expected to be less or smaller compared to the MR20. This is calculated based on 46 terms, whereas the MR30 is calculated based on 36 terms. This is based on 46 terms, but this is based on 36 terms only. Of course, the amount of MR30 is smaller compared to the MR20. Now, what is the amount of the investment that is optimal? So in this case, MR equals to MC. The marginal revenue of the training must be equal to the cost, the additional cost that you have spent on the training. And which is why in this case, MR20 is higher, whereas the MR30 is lower. Why higher? Why lower? I have already explained to you just now, because of the number of terms entered into the calculation. So we can expect that for those who obtain the training at the age of 20, the additional revenue from that particular training throughout his lifetime will be as high as this much, MR20. For those who obtain the training at 30, the additional revenue will be just as low as this. But the additional cost of obtaining the training is getting higher and higher, because as more and more training is obtained, more and more cost is incurred. Therefore, adding one more year of training or adding one more unit of training will incur additional cost that is even higher than the previous level of the training, which is why the marginal cost of training is getting higher and higher. So the MR equals to the MC is where the optimal level of the training should be acquired. Now you can see, facing with the same cost of training, if you obtain the training at the age of 20, so you're going to enjoy greater revenue, which is why at the age of 20, you tend to obtain more training. At the age of 30, since the revenue is lower, then at the age of 30, you tend to obtain less amount of training. The Q30 is less than the Q20. That explains the reason why when you are at a younger age, as young as 20 years old, you tend to obtain more training. More training. At the age of 30, which is old, relatively old, you tend to obtain less training. And as a result of that, since you obtain less training, the increase in the salary cannot be greater because the amount of training is less. For those who obtain greater amount of training at a younger age, the increase in the salary will be higher for this person because the amount of training is greater. Therefore, this is the reason why the age earnings profile is concave. And the concavity of the age earnings profile can be explained by the human capital theory. Now, when you look at this, the earnings actually relates to the age using the age earnings profile, and it is concave. The older you are, it will be more likely that it will come to an extent that if you hit the age of 670, if you have retired and you want to return to the job market, if you're retired and you want to return to the job market to stay active, then you expect to get lower salary than your last drawn salary. You cannot expect to get a higher salary because physically you may not be fit. Okay? So of course you have to pass the opportunity to the young people. Therefore, it will come to an extent that the age earnings profile could be something like an inverted U-shaped relationship. Therefore, in terms of mathematics, we have to consider the concavity of the earnings function. Like I mentioned just now, the Minserian earnings function is characterized by the earnings being the dependent variable and the y0 to be the constant. I'm sure you have already learned about the regression. And the S over here is the year of schooling. Now, just now, in my previous slide, when I discussed about the regression model, I only discussed about this portion. Okay, but besides that, besides the schooling, the training can also affect the salary, right? So therefore, the training can affect the salary, and the training can be reflected through the experience you have had. The longer the year of experience you have accumulated, you are expected to have accumulated greater amount of training through your experience. Therefore, Mincer used experience to reflect the amount of training you have obtained. So therefore, when we consider experience, that is the reason why we have to consider experience as one of the independent variables in the Mincerian wage equation, because the experience itself reflects that amount of training. But why should we include the experience square? Experience and the experience square. Why should the square be included into the Mincerian wage? Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Please check your mic. Okay, please make sure you have already muted your mic. Right, in order to avoid the disturbance. Okay, thank you very much for your concern. Now, experience square. Why should the experience be squared, and why should be entered into the model? Because in this case, I'm almost done. Yeah, I have another 2 more slides, and we call it a day. All right, because we have to capture the concavity of the age earnings profile. Remember, this is the age earnings profile you have learned just now. At a younger age, the salary is increased at an increasing rate. There's a positive impact between the between the age and the earnings. All right, the age also reflects the experience, which is why we use the experience to represent the training. The more experienced someone is, the older someone is, right? So therefore, the experience itself also reflects age, as well as the amount of training, which is why the older a person is, the more experienced a person is, and the more training the person must have already obtained. And it's related to the it's related to the earnings by alpha 2. Look at the alpha 2 over here. Alpha 2 is expected to be positive impact over here. But right after the maximum point, we expect that the older the person is, the lower the salary. Now, in order to capture the inverted U-shape, I'm sure you must have already learned that in the secondary school. You differentiate the equation with the first order condition. You take the first order condition, differentiating the earnings function with respect to the experience, you get alpha squared plus 2 alpha 3 experience. All right? And when you set it equal to 0, that is the optimal point. And in this case, we have a maximum point over here. So you can actually rearrange this equation to get this answer. And this answer, well, is taken from the coefficient alpha 2 divided by 2 times alpha 3. Now, when you estimate this equation, you are going to get the coefficient for alpha 3, alpha 2, alpha 1 for the schooling, for the experience. And these alpha as the coefficient actually is called the rate of returns. The alpha is the rate of returns of the schooling. The alpha 2, alpha 3 is the rate of returns from the experience, which is calculated by this. This is the rate of returns of the experience. Alpha 2 plus, okay, this is the rate of returns from the experience. Now, if you substitute the average value for experience, you're going to get this value. Okay, that is the rate of returns from the experience. Now, if you want to find the maximum value of the experience, what is the year of experience that actually pays the maximum amount of the earnings? Now, you can actually set the first order conditions equal to 0 and to calculate, to solve for the experience, and you're going to get a value over here. For example, 20 years of experience. If you have obtained 20 years of experience, that's where your earning is maximized. After 20 years, then your salary becomes lower. Now, the reason for us to include the square over here, because we have to capture the quadratic behavior of this graph. If you take the second order condition, you differentiate this equation once again, you're going to get, you differentiate this equation once again on the second order condition, you're going to get, differentiate the y with respect to the experience once again, second time, you're going to get only 2 alpha 3. 2 alpha 3. All right. And the alpha 3, when you estimate the relationship, it must be negative. Negative to show that the earnings will drop subsequently, showing the negative relationship between the age and the experience. Now, 2 is positive, alpha 3 is negative. So positive, negative will return with a negative value. Therefore, the second order condition will result in a negative value. And a negative value means it is the inverted U-shape parabola. The quadratic should be an inverted U-shape, but not U-shape. If it is a positive, therefore it is U-shape. But since it is a negative, therefore the parabola for the quadratic will be inverted U-shape, which is reflective of the age earnings profile concavity. All right, which is why we have to take the square here in order to capture the concavity of the relationship between the age and the earnings. So that's why if you want to carry out this study to find the rate of returns of the education, you can actually estimate, you can actually estimate this equation. Schooling as the independent variable, experience square, and the Z over here. The Z can be some other characteristics like ability, demographic characteristics, family backgrounds, any other skills, occupation, so on and so forth, that can actually affect the salary, and that's called the vector of the variable. But the Minserian wedge equation actually is characterized by this. The schooling and the experience square must be in the earnings function to reflect the Minserian earnings function. All right, so let me give you, before we end our lecture, let me show you one article written by my colleagues from from UKM, from the Faculty of Economics and Management, to examine the impact of the training on the wage and also the wage distribution. Now, this article tells us that, look at that, experience square school. Schooling has, now, if you refer to the OLS regression, schooling has a positive impact. Yes, it is. It is a positive impact. Look at that. That's a positive impact. Okay. Now, schooling has a positive impact. The higher the year of schooling, the greater the year of schooling, the greater the earnings. And when we study the wage distribution, the schooling is important. It is important for those bottom 10% of the income earner. And it's also important for the top 10% of the high income earner over here across the wage distribution. Okay. Sorry, I think can you still see my slide? Am I still sharing my screen? Am I still sharing my screen? Hello?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No. Okay, one moment, please. Okay. Okay. Yes, I'm sharing right now, right?
Okay.
Okay, you're still hearing me? Can you still hear me? And can you still see my slide? Okay, right. Now in this case, we can see that the schooling is important. The schooling is important to increase the salary, and it's also important for those, the bottom 10% of the income earner, as well as the top 10% of the high income earner. And experience has a positive impact, and the experience square has a negative impact. You see that? Negative, positive. All right? So it's the same. Now, experience is also important for the bottom 10% of the income earner and the top 10% of the income earner in the wage distribution. Now, what is important here is about the impact of training. Training here has a positive impact on the wage. The greater the amount of training, the greater the salary. And the training is also especially important for those low income earner, the bottom 10% of the income earner. It's positive impact, as well as the top 10% of the high income earner. But it's not so relevant for those earning somewhere with, between and in the middle of the wage distribution. So that means training is important for those high skilled workers as well as the low skilled workers in Malaysia. And this is the model. Experience square, schooling, training. Experience. This article used the experience as well as the training to reflect the amount of experience and also the training. Now, this article explicitly considers the training, the number of the training, as one of the independent variables besides the experience. Now, Minserian model only use experience. Minserian models only use experience and experience square to reflect the training, but this article used the training to explicitly capture the impact of the number of trainings to the wage. All right, and with this, these are the independent variables. You can take a look on your own. With that, now you can see how important the human capital is. We have already covered the human capital investment in terms of the education and the human capital investment in terms of the training, All right, so with that, I end my lecture today. So do you have any question to ask? So 3 hours lecture, I make full use of all the 3 hours lecture. Nathaniel, yes, you have a question to ask?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
May I ask now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. What happened in some case that someone who have a lower level of education but have much higher skill or ability than someone who have a higher level of education?
Mm-hmm.
and which is more important for us and for the company who hiring us. Because in my opinion, you can correct it later, someone who have the higher level of education will have the ability to think more critical and will have them at their jobs. But someone who have the higher ability or skill can be able to jump right into the job and do their job like usual, which is more important, sir.
I would say both are all important. You cannot say both are not substitutes. They are not perfectly substituted. I would say both are important, education and training, which is why if you refer to the article I showed you just now, you can see that the schooling and also the training are all important. Now, if the schooling, if the education and training have been perfectly substituted, that means either one will be significant. Now, in this case, the past studies show that many past studies have already proven that the schooling actually has a positive and significant impact, as well as the training. So both the schooling and the trainings actually have the positive impact and significant impact on the wage. That means the education and the skill should not be considered as the perfect substitute. Both must work hand in hand in order to improve the salary. If you have the education, but if you don't have the skill related or needed for you. Now, just imagine if you study in the university, so the knowledge from the university will be obsolete one day in the future. So therefore, when you're in the job market, you still have to invest in the training in order to enhance, to keep yourself abreast with the latest development in the technology so that you pick up the important skill. Now, the knowledge you have learned from the university, coupled with the skills you have learned in the workplace, all in short, all it will work along the way, hand in hand, to increase the salary to a greater extent. Now, just when I would say they complement each other. They cannot substitute each other. They complement each other. Now, it is just like what is proven by my paper I've shown you just now, published in the International Labor Review. I've shown you just now, just when the education, over-education has caused the wage penalty, or the under-education will cause the wage penalty. So how are we going to solve or address the education mismatch? The problem of the education mismatch can be solved if you have the training, if you have the skills. It is a skill itself that can actually make up the difference and make up the gap. Now, if you have the gap education mismatch, to fill up the gap, you need the skills. You need the skills in order for you to make up the loss, okay, make up the balance of what you have not obtained, so it can be complemented by the skills and the training. In short, the which can be improved. All right, I would say both are all important. But if you have the skill, but if you don't have the education, it's also dicey as well. It's also risky, because if you have the skill, you have the specific skill, but you do not have the theory, which is why many students, many people, many managers, they return to the university to obtain an MBA or even a PhD. They have the practical experience, but when it comes to conceptualized knowledge, they are lacking. This is something they need so that the knowledge they have learned in the university can be applied in their workplace in line with or along with the skills they have possessed. So that's why I would say both the education and the skills work hand in hand in order to improve the earnings of a worker. Okay, I hope I've already answered that question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes,
Sir.
Adelia Najjato. Adela.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for the space, doctor.
Yeah,
So, you said before that education is affect the salary of a person. So I want to ask you, does the decision of people on a nation for the education affect the level of wage at the nation itself?
Can you repeat your question? I can't get your question clearly. Can you repeat your question?
Okay. I'm sorry, maybe she means.
Okay.
We know that in every nation, in every country, we have the different level of education. We have the different decision of education for the people itself. And our question is, does the decision from the people in each country will affect to the government to make the arrangement of the level of salary in that nation? So
Doctor. Maybe that's our question. Is that
Okay.
understandable enough?
All right, yeah, sure, very clear. So that means the initiative actually comes from the people itself. If the people has the request, have the demand for the education, so definitely the government should implement the policy in order to facilitate. Yes, it could be the other way around. So it could be both way. It works both way. So it is the government that initially implement the policy to to make it compulsory for everybody to receive at least the basic education. You have to attend the basic education. So this is the policy. This is the initiative from the government to make it compulsory for everyone to obtain that basic level of the education. So that is one way. That is from the government to the people. All right. Now, the other way around, from the education to the government. Now, in this case, if there is a market requirement, if the market requires this much of the skills to be possessed by the workers, and the market actually requires the institution, the higher learning institution, to produce high-level skilled workers. So therefore, the demand actually comes from the industry. Now, knowing that there is the demand from the industry, there is a market requirement. So therefore, the government will have to do something in turn in order to develop the school, in order to spend more money to increase the government spending in building the school, building the learning institutions, building the training center, in order to make the education resources available for everyone, since it's very important. Therefore, the initiative comes from the society, comes from the labor market, comes from the education center as well. Now, also, if the education institution knows that there is an increasing enrollment rate to the university, therefore, the institution requires the government to increase the government spending, especially in expanding the infrastructure, expanding, to build more school, all right, provide more education resources, so on and so forth. All this actually requires the government assistance. Therefore, the impact actually comes from the school. All right, so that's why the education, the labor market, and also the requirement or the demand for the education actually will go back to the government. Will go to the government, and then will channel to the government. The demand, the request will be channeled to the government, yeah, and then the government will in turn do something, maybe in terms of the policy or in terms of the government spending, to help further promote the education. This is what's happening in just about every country. It could work both ways. Hope it answered your question.
Okay, clear enough.
Thank you.
Sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Adela. Thank you. Deborah. Deborah?
Thank you for the time, sir. I have two questions about this. Number one, in the topic of the potential earnings streams faced by a high school student, about the school model, there are two types of students. First, students are studying and doing a part-time working. This job or part-time means that students are working in the company, and the others, or the second one, is students are not working, just studying.
Sorry, come again. The part-time student work. Where does the part-time student work?
The other is students are not working, just studying.
Okay, one person. Okay, there are two students. The first student is working, and the second student is focusing on the study.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Working as a part-timer. All right. Okay. So next, what's your question?
The question is, are these two types of students in the same line? In the context goes to college.
I can't get you. Sorry, I can't get you clearly. Just now there's a disturbance. I can't get you clearly. Can you repeat your question? Yeah, the last part of the question.
The question is, in the line of the goes to college, if these two types of students along in the same line need to be separated.
Sorry, I can't get you. Well, would you like to type your sentence here, or? I don't get it. I don't get it. Oh, is that your question? Okay.
Yeah, Deborah already typed the question.
Already
Doctor,
typed the
in
question.
chat.
All right. There are two types of students. First, the students are studying and doing the part-time working. And this job, part-time, means that the students are working in the company. Okay, working in the company. All right. That's what many students are doing right now. If you're studying in a university, at the same time you're working as well in the company as well. All right. And the other student is not working, just studying. Okay. So when these two types of the students have graduated, all right, both of them have graduated, the types of the students who have more work experience, which have already had experience working as a part-timer, okay, so has the greater opportunities than the other. Okay, is it a statement, or you want to ask me whether is it true or not true? Okay, the question is, are these two types of the students along the same line in going to the college? Does this need to be separated? Along the same line, what do you mean by along the same line going to the college? What do you mean by along the same line? You mean the graph or what? Along the same line in going to the college? I don't get you. I don't get the second part of the question. Are these two types of the student along the same line, or maybe getting the same salary, or being treated equally, being treated the same, getting the same remuneration after graduating from the university? Because one person has the work experience, another person doesn't have the work experience. So does this need to be separated? I guess that you're asking me about the graph, yeah, about the graph. Is it, Deborah? Did you ask me about the graph?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now if you want to separate it, yes, you can separate it. Yes, we can separate it. In that case, you know, remember the graph? Remember the graph? So there will be another graph. Maybe I can share my screen over here. Okay. So I'm not sure whether I'm still sharing my screen. No. Can you see my screen? Okay, now in this case, we say that going to the school, well, quit the high school. Okay, in the school. Yes, definitely yes. Maybe this person will have a higher starting pay. Okay. No, we don't have to split it. You can combine these two lines together. You can combine these two lines together, just that you have to differentiate it. So for example, this is a person who study, doesn't have the work experience, and this is the potential earning stream for the person who goes to the college but worked as a part-timer as well, part-time. Okay, so this one without the part-time, this one with the part-time. So therefore you can draw a graph like this. Okay, so it's different. So that means at least you can show the difference between those graduating from the school with the work experience and without the work experience. Now, yeah, you can draw the graph this way. Okay, hope I've answered your question. You don't have to separate your graph. It can be combined. It can be superimposed. It can be superimposed into the same graph. Next, what's next? What's your next question?
Deborah, please, your second question.
Okay, your second question is students who have the desire to achieve the MBA, but many of them are hesitant about this because of the demand for the workers looking for the work with a bachelor's degree. What do you mean? Because of the demand for the workers looking for workers with a bachelor's degree, Or do you mean that because of the employers looking for someone who has just got the bachelor's degree? Okay, however, they are not looking for the workers who have the MBA degree. I guess that what you mean is students have the desire to achieve the MBA, but it's just that the employer may have the desire to hire just the bachelor's, but not those who have the MBA. All right, that is the employer's preference. However, they're not looking for the workers who have the MBA degree because the wages are higher than the other workers. Okay, the wages are higher than the other workers. All right. The question is, do students have to study until they get a master's qualification? Do students have to study until they get a master's degree? Well, let me just try to understand your question. Do students have to study until they get a master's degree? Do you mean that do students need to study and get a master's qualification? Or do you mean that do students need to study until he finished the master's qualification, master's degree? Which one do you mean? This is different things. These are two different things. You want to study, is it still necessary to study an MBA? Is that what you mean? Now, okay, I explained two possibilities, all right? Now, if your question means that is it still relevant to study master? Is it still relevant to study master if the employer only prefers hiring the bachelor's? If I remember, if I interpret your question correctly, if this is your question, okay? Now my answer is no. You have to study the master in order to stand out of the crowd. Of course, like I told you just now, there are two different types of the theory, relating education and the work and the salary. Now, for someone who gets the master's qualification, the master can serve as a signal to the employer to infer about the potential productivity the workers can offer to the employer. So having obtained a master's qualification, it is a proof of quality, which is why many people, including the managers, they prefer to return to the university in order to get a master's qualification, in order to convince the employer about his potential productivity. Okay, so that's the value of the master. And also, what is the lesson? If you study master, you should know the study environment is different. The way to train a master's degree holder, the problem-solving skills, all these skills, the presentation skills, the problem-solving skills, the cognitive ability that is required of learning at the master's level is at a higher level. So that means if you have the master's degree, that means we assume that this person must have already gone through this rigorous learning process. Having gone through this rigorous learning process means that it is actually a criterion that is important to be sought after by the employer in the future, which is why those who have studied the master is expected to have a higher productivity because it can apply the learning skills he has obtained at the master level to be applied into the job market, and which will improve the productivity, and in turn, the salary can be improved. But hang on, those who have the master, the MBA, must complement with the past experience. Together with the past experience and with the academic qualification, the salary can be increased greater. He will become more marketable. All right, which is why many students, when they study master, so they are with the hope that they can actually get promoted once they've graduated from the master. I have my master student who's almost same age as mine, who's a few years younger than me. That she's studying master right now in my class right now, and she's working adult. Because her boss sent her to the university because her boss wants her to invest in the master so that after getting the master, she can be promoted to the next level. Now, if your question about do students have to study until they get a master's degree, if what you mean is, do they have to finish the entire 2-year program first in order to get a higher salary? Yes, they should. Because in theory, in economics, there is a theory called sheepskin effect. A sheepskin effect. Sheepskin effect tells us that now, in terms of education, If the diploma, if the master's degree is only 1 year, sorry, it's 2 years, there are 2 years. Now, if you only study for 1 year, if you have not completed 2 years, the full cost takes you 2 years. If you only study 1 year and you claim yourself to be a master's degree holder, no, it's worthless. It's worthless because it's no use, because you cannot claim yourself to be masters because you have not even complete the 2 years of the education. So sheepskin effect means that the value of the education is only important. The value is only observed once you have completed the full course of the program. But if you have stopped in the middle, the sheepskin effect tells us you shouldn't consider yourself to be a master's degree holder to have obtained that level of an education. I'm not sure which question you're asking me, so I have explained to you both ways. All right, so hope I've explained to you. Patrick Timothy. Hope I've already answered your question. Deborah. Patrick.
All right, sir.
Yes. Perhaps that's
thank
the
you
last
for
question.
the
Okay.
answer that you have given for me.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Is there a relationship between the human capital concept and the brain drain concept? If so, what happens if a country needs to improve their national income by having a lot of high educated workers, but at the same time they have a biggest issue of brain drain concept at the same time?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. In the past studies, the human capital has been related to the brain drain, because the greater the level of the education that you have obtained, it will be more likely for people to seek for greener pasture. Now, just imagine if you have been trained overseas and you have this high skill. Now, when you return to your country, your skill cannot be brought into practice. So therefore, it will be more likely for you to seek for the greener pasture, to migrate to another country, to look for a better job that can actually better utilize your knowledge. That's where the brain drain occurs. It will cause a flowing out of the talent from a country. That's called the brain drain. It's partly because the level of the education is higher for people. So the human capital is related to the brain drain. But of course, if that's the case, if we want to retain the talent, should we reduce the human capital investment? No, we shouldn't, because we have already known how important the human capital investment is. Therefore, the human capital investment should be continued. The strategy of investing in the human capital should be continued and it should be strengthened. But what is important here is on how should the government retain the talent, to attract the talent to return to the country. Partially, maybe one of the policies can be in terms of the wage structure. By increasing the remuneration for those high-skilled workers compared to what is offered in the other country. Just imagine our neighboring country. Workers in Malaysia, high-skilled workers in Malaysia, just how many high-skilled workers in Malaysia flowing out to Singapore every year? That's a brain drain. Now, if Malaysia is willing to offer salary that is competitive or comparable to that offered by Singapore, or at least at par, if it is not higher, but at par or slightly lower. So I think in this way, I think it will be, people will be attracted to return to the country. So this is the way for the country to attract the talent. The country can also attract the talent, to retain the talent, by creating more job opportunities that suit to the high-skilled workers, so that they will not leave the country. Now, how should we create more job opportunities? So the government should attract the high-quality foreign investors to invest in the country, bringing in the technology into the country in order to expand the job opportunities, to make full use of the large pool of the high-skilled workers in this country, so that those workers will be able to, get employed and don't have to seek for the greener pastures abroad. So with that, I think that should be one of the few ways for the government to retain the talent at the same time of investing in the human capital. Hope I've answered your question. Thank you, Timo. Thank you, Patrick. All right. Anything to ask? Okay, maybe we take the last question from Nia Novita. Nia, last question.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the opportunity. First, I want make clear about, did you say that college is not the key of the future value can be higher or bigger than the opportunities that we earn in present time?
Sorry, can you repeat your
My
question?
question-
The college.
Yeah, the college is not the key of the future value can be higher or bigger than the
Yeah.
opportunities that we earn in present time.
Yeah.
My question is there any activities that we can do except getting in college or doing a job that will give us future value, the higher future value?
All right. Thank you very much for your question. I guess that every college student should have been exposed to the internship. So if you work on the industrial training, if you go out and gain some experience of working for maybe like 3 to 4 months, I guess that is an addition to your graduate profile. So that's why many universities at the graduate level, they send the students outside to undergo the internship for maybe 3 to 4 months or even half a year. And that's part of the program of the study, because the knowledge, the experience they've gained from the internship is very important. Yeah, like what I've shown you in one of the slides just now, it's very important because it actually tells the employer it actually let employer infer the productivity of the workers. So if you have the work experience together with the knowledge, you're no longer fresh graduate. That will actually improve your marketability, which is why the internship is important. I hope your university also offers internship as well. Also requires the student to undergo the internship and make it compulsory for the student to undergo the internship. Now, as a college student as well, I guess that many of you may have the experience of participating in the students' activity. Being the president, secretary, vice president, being involved in the student activity. All right, so to hold some event. Now, from this event participation, you actually can learn the soft skill, the problem-solving skill, the problem-solving skill, communication skill, interpersonal skill. All these soft skills are important. And of course, you can write this your participation into your CV. You can put it into your CV. Your participation in the student activity can be written in the CV. And when it is sent to the employer during the interview, the employer will consider that, because they will look at your students' participation at the school. So if you're actively participating in the students' activity, definitely you stand a higher chance to be considered, because the employer doesn't want someone who is good at studying, who has a good CGPA, but at the same time, the employer wants to know the trainability of the workers. The employer wants to know whether the workers has a good command of English, whether the workers has a good command of the problem-solving skills. Under this situation, now, where can you get this skill from? Definitely you can't get it from the textbook, because you can get it from the daily communication or interaction with your friends in the university, or through the participation in the students' activity, which is why student activity is important for every one of you. Don't just study, but at the same time, you have to join the extracurricular activity. Okay, so hopefully with that, even you're a fresh graduate, I hope that with that in your CV, it can actually impress your employer. But of course, you need to have a good command of English to impress your future employer further. All right, thank you very much for your question. I guess that Yola, back to you.
Okay, Doctor. So this is the end of our guest lecture on the first session. Thank you, Dr. Y, for sharing your knowledge and insightful topic to us. And also, thank you for all participants who is joining this meeting today. Okay, we will see you again next.
See you again. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
13 April on the same time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Bye.
See you next week, Doctor.